across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This
Welcome to Morning Glory and welcome to Talk, the home of common sense. We are, of course, here every single weekday morning from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'm trying to remember 10 a.m. Some people would like us to be here from 6 till 10 p.m. But there we are. Theo Usherwood is here with us. Very, very good morning to you, Theo. Thank you very much indeed. That was Liam, who appears to have tried to give a header to one of the cameras before he walked out of the room. Listen, it's one of those mornings. Sometimes things don't go as well as you would expect them to. But what we're being told by the scientists is that one of the things that we do know is that actually we do solve more problems in the morning and we do feel better in the morning. And I'm convinced that part of the reason for that is that we are actually starting the show at 6 a.m. now instead of 6:30. And so people are very, very much more able to get up, able to listen, able to, whether you're lying in bed, whether you're driving a car, whether you're in your van, whether you're on a bike, well, maybe if you're not on a bike, whatever you're doing, tune in to Morning Glory, because this is the place to be. This is the only place to be for the news, the views, and the things that you won't hear anywhere else. We've been very, very buoyed by all of your success and all of your very much encouraging words over the course of time. This morning we're going to be talking about Keir Starmer. Once more, still the voice coach scenario has not yet been going anywhere near the truth. We still need to know exactly what she was doing. We found out a lot more about her, the woman who was the voice coach. We found out a lot more about how much of a Labour supporter she was and still is. We found out an awful lot more about what it was that she might have been doing while she was with Keir Starmer, and we'll bring you that news. We've got some breaking news on that. Also, we'll talk about Lucy Letby, of course. That's all over the front pages as well. But also, the Chagos Islands, they're giving away even more money than they said they had. They're talking about not 9 billion, not 10 billion, not 11 billion, but something like 18 billion pounds to ask somebody to take an island away from us and also, you know, be paid for the privilege. Absolutely and utterly mad. Donald Trump is in the news, of course, because he's been talking about Gaza. He said nobody should go back to live there. It's a dump. Yeah, well, so's New Jersey. You know, it doesn't mean that people shouldn't go there, does it? But we'll be talking about all of that as well. 0344 499 1000. This is Morning Glory. Let us get it on. So, very good morning to Theo Usherwood, who is here with us. Theo, good to see you. I mean, there's lots and lots on the front pages today about Lucy Letby, which we'll get to a little bit later on. But I'd really like to hear your view on the whole situation with the old voice coach, you know, because the voice coach story has literally come out of nowhere. Yes. Again, it was something that we weren't expecting to hear. It was something that we didn't expect to have to be covering. And yet, this woman, Leonie, whatever her name is, malingerer, as I like to call her, has been incredibly sort of quite active actually on social media since it even broke. And he's not out of the woods, is he, on this?
He's not out of the woods. Now this is, yes, of course, Leonie Malinga, and she was a voice coach who could have. And what was interesting about this was that NHS speech therapists at the time were instructed to work from home. Yeah. And yet, this was when we were in tier. She was going from tier 3 into tier 4. Strict lockdown conditions. Comes in, a supporter, you know, comes in to support Keir Starmer. Yeah. Could have done an online session, and Keir Starmer, his team, you know, appeared to be, you know, he insisted when he was cornered by the Sun's Jack Elsom at that press conference on Monday.
How tetchy was he?
All the rules. By the way,
of course not.
What's going to be really interesting, though, does he say it in the House of Commons today? Because, of course, if he says it in the House of Commons today and it turns out that the rules weren't followed, then that would be, then he would, it can be proven. And this is what did for Boris Johnson, that he is, of course, misled the House of Commons by saying the rules were followed and it turns out they weren't followed. Then that's real trouble for that. Keir Starmer,
I mean, there's been a lot written around it, hasn't it? Because people have decided to sort of deconstruct the niceties of. Well, there's one scenario whereby there's a law over here, but then the other bit is that it's not necessarily a law that's broken. For example, you know, Dan Hodges, who's coming on the show later on, put out a tweet yesterday to say, you know, the instructions on that particular situation were, please work from home unless you cannot do so, right? But, you know, there's no way that you can actually convince me that if you're a voice coach, you have to work from an office, because she did most of her work over Zoom. And worse than that is 3 months afterwards,
she then boasted about
the fact, isn't it great to be back working in person? So she wasn't working in person apparently in December. And I think you and I both would lift the lid off of what you would regard as like normal conversation and go, on Christmas Eve, you get invited to see the Prime Minister, or sorry, the Leader of the Opposition. You travel all the way from Brighton, you take the trouble of taking a picture on the train that you're on, which nobody else is on, an empty train, going, oh, there's nobody on the train except for me because I'm going to see Keir Starmer. You go all the way up to London and you have whatever it is, a session that you have with him. And I'm not suggesting anything untoward, but it sounds to me like he invited her for a drink. He invited her for some kind of social occasion, which she then went to do, and then she went back.
Well, the social occasion, that would be breach of lockdown.
Exactly.
That would be a breach of the rules.
Saying.
If it was a social occasion.
And so they can hide behind the fact that they're saying, oh, she was a key worker, she needs to come to work, she couldn't work from home. All of that, the evidence would suggest that none of that is true. She could have done it from home. She did it from home several times before with him. She didn't need to come to London to do whatever it was she did. She obviously came to London because she wanted to.
Yes, and Keir Starmer was, and this is where it gets to the hypocrisy argument.
Yeah.
And you can make the differentiation, and Labour have done it, and the Prime Minister has done it. You know, obviously Boris Johnson was having his parties in Downing Street, and he got the equivalent of a speeding fine for doing that.
Right.
But the point is, the point is that Keir Starmer, that will your listeners differentiate between a voice coach coming in when they were told, you know, if you're not a key worker, if you're non-essential, don't work in purpose.
This is what we call in the business a slow burn story, isn't it? Because I mean, I picked up on it straight away because some people are not as quick as me, but you know, people are now picking up on it. Yesterday there was more interest in it. You know, the day before there was less interest in it, but it's definitely gathering momentum because people are saying, well, hang on a minute, you know, I remember back to those days, and you and I will remember. You have to think about it quite hard because there is that kind of a morphing of that whole kind of COVID period. But 2020 was right at the
end of 2020 into that Christmas.
Was right at the beating heart. And I remember in 2020. I was planning to go to America to go and see my mother. I couldn't go. Julie Hartley-Bureau talked about it yesterday. She was on her way to Antigua when they introduced the Tier 4 thing, which would have meant she couldn't go to Antigua if she had left, you know, if she had left it a day later. And loads of people had to cancel plans that they had made as a result of the Tier 4 thing that was brought in. Now, you know, call it whatever you want. You know, people were not being kowtowed, but you had to agree to do it under pain of death, or at least under pain of prosecution.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, and the problem for Keir Starmer is because he was so vociferous about, you know, being the man all about the rules and I didn't break any rules and all of that. If it turns out that he did, he's going to look even more ridiculous than he does now.
And the only thing that will get him off this, of course, and in terms of if it turns out that he did break the rules, what will get him off this is not that he would be found to be innocent. What would get him off it is the statute of limitations of 3 years, which means that prosecution can't be brought.
Right.
So it's unlike, you know, the police are not going to be able to prosecute him for this particular case, regardless of the outcome, because there's this 3-year statute of limitations, which is how long you have to bring up a case with it. Yeah. What seems to be where he seems to be going, and the Mail have done it on page 11, and this is from.
There's a delicious new detail that's come out about her being married to Robin Asquith, who was, of course, the star of a load of 1970s sex comedies.
Yes, he boasted about, of course, being part of the Royal Shakespeare Company, but his confessions that he starred in Confessions of a Window Cleaner.
Confessions of a Window Cleaner, which I remember very well because I was a teenage boy at the time, and those are the kind of movies that you couldn't wait to see. When you were 14.
Don't talk it down, because the first film here, it says it was the most successful British production of 1974.
There you go. I was 14 years of age. I remember it coming out, Confessions of a Window Cleaner, and it was basically Robin Asquith going in and out of women's houses. They were always in a state of undress. Right. Normally, they're very soft porn. It wasn't horrible, nasty stuff like you see now. But she was married to him, right? And so all this talk about, I'm a Royal Shakespearean actress. Oh, really? Really, are you? And also, I found out yesterday as well, and I retweeted it, that what is pinned to the top of her Twitter account is her sitting with Gary Lineker saying, "Oh, I've just done a podcast with Gary Lineker." So they're all in the same boat here, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's a prosecutable offence. It should be, in my view. You know, hanging out with Gary Lineker, you should be prosecuted for something. But you know, it's all just a little bit too cosy. It's all a little bit too, you know, nice. And also the other thing that was raised yesterday by Rebecca Butler, a lawyer that we know well here on this show, she said, "Why is Keir Starmer charging money, because he was paid 18,000 quid by this woman's husband, right, for some legal assistance that he gave them over some issue or other. You know, why is he charging money when he's not actually registered with the Bar Association as a lawyer?" And you know, there's all kinds of, you know, problems around this whole story.
Yeah, there's a sort of clique. There's a clique.
There's a stench.
And what your
like
listeners
fish.
What do your listeners want to know? They don't mind Keir Starmer being squeakier than, you know, squeaky clean. Right? They don't mind it, but he's, you know, they don't mind him criticising Boris Johnson, criticising Rishi Sunak. No, they can stomach that. But then he's got to be whiter than white. He's got to be Mr. Rules.
If
in
he's
the
calling
words
for people to resign because they ate a piece of cake in their office, he better not have done anything like it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And that's what people don't like. And it's a similar story we've had previously, where Keir Starmer has said one thing, got into office and done another thing. They don't like that.
And also it feeds into what we know about Keir Starmer. Having been in power for 6 months, we know that this man is a total and utter hypocrite. Let's have a look back to 2022, if you can remember that far back. Here's what Keir Starmer said in the Commons.
Doesn't the Prime Minister realise that John would have given the world to hold his dying wife's hand, even if it was just for 9 minutes? But he didn't, because he followed the Prime Minister's rules. Rules that we now know the Prime Minister blithely, repeatedly and deliberately ignored.
I mean, the sanctimonious stench of absolute and utter hypocrisy comes through, doesn't it? I mean, you can play... in fact, we'll play that all through the day today, because I just find this man to be completely and utterly, indefensibly disgraceful, right? Because he is not a leader. And worse than that, he's not just a hypocrite. He is a complete and utter... I don't know what the word would be for him. He doesn't give a stuff about the ordinary people of this country. And he thinks that the law doesn't apply to him, even though he's a lawyer. What an absolute disgrace that is. How dare he, by the way, use the death of somebody to try and make a point about Boris Johnson, when he himself knew, at that very moment, knew that he was breaking the rules and had broken the rules, because it's very clear that
that's April 2022.
This is 2022.
And that would have course
2 years after he invited old, you know, Robin Asquith, the soft porn king of Britain. I don't know whether he was having sex with her. I don't know whether he was inviting her for a drink. All I know is that he shouldn't have invited her for anything, because basically it was against the rules.
Yes, it was against the... It was against... The problem he's got, Mike, and this is something that keeps on cropping up, is that Labour, this was the whole platform. This was the whole platform of their general election campaign, was based on everything that we saw in the run-up to, until we got down to basically the final 6 weeks when we started talking about policies, right? The whole basis of Keir Starmer's platform was that he wasn't the Tories. That they were going to come in, they were going to clean up politics.
Clean it all up, no cronyism.
They do everything differently.
And the minute he got in, we found out that he was getting free clothes from Lord Ali, free spectacles from Lord Ali. Half of his cabinet were getting bankrolled by Lord Ali. They were given hotels, they were given apartments, they were given houses to live in. You know, sleaze was literally dripping from every pore of their essence.
But it goes back, and with this story and with other stories, it goes back into his time in actual opposition, when he was actually saying one thing and doing another.
Exactly.
And that's problematic.
And that's what people hate. I mean, people will forgive many things, right? They would forgive Boris for all of the stuff that he did.
But he always was honest. Right? He was always upfront about who he was.
Because he was a bit hapless, and he was sort of clattering about and going, "Oh, I see you've managed to impregnate yet another woman, Boris. Oh, you're sorry." You know, people forgave him for that because they saw him as a sort of
hypocrisy,
bit of a bungling, character. But this guy is absolutely and utterly insidiously, I think, not only just misrepresenting himself, but is actually a really nasty piece of work, because what he's doing is being completely and utterly cavalier, shall we say, with the rules. When he says he's absolutely going to do everything to stick by them, not only cavalier with the rules, but completely cavalier with the British public, as if we don't care, as if we don't notice, as if we don't realise that he's taking us for fools. And I think that's unforgivable.
You can easily,
and that's why people hate him.
Yeah. People don't like it, and that's why he's got a lower approval rating, disapproval rating than Rishi Sunak. He's down on -42. Look, I think what's going to happen, and we'll come on to some other stories, that I think the sharks are going to start to circle.
Yeah, they are.
And I think the Labour Party...
It's another indication of his two-faced hypocrisy, which people just won't stomach after time.
And I think Labour MPs, are now... At the end of last year, it felt like, OK, they can turn it around. At the moment, it is feeling increasingly like they've just lost control of any sense of narrative, of any sense that they're here to improve people's lives.
Yeah.
And
nobody believes a word they say anymore. Nobody.
And the only thing that is there to defend Keir Starmer is we're something like 50 months out from a general election.
Yeah.
That's the only thing.
Yeah.
If we were within 12 months of a general election, they would be the Wes Streetings, the Angie Rayners would be circling and thinking, look, we're going to get absolutely annihilated in the ballot box next time round.
Yeah.
But the only thing that's saving him at the moment is the fact that there is such a gap between now and the next, public ballot.
I heard some stories just the other day about Wes Streeting, and they were not good. And one of the reasons why he's not doing quite so well as we all thought he would do, because I had great hopes of Wes Streeting. Actually, I thought he would be one of the sort of guiding lights of the new Labour government. He's a nasty piece of work, it turns out to be. And the stories about what he was doing during Labour Party conference, drinking, Dom Perignon till 3 o'clock in the morning, shouting at people, abusing the waiters, really, really nasty guy. Really not a nice person. And I was really quite surprised when I heard that. Shocked, actually. I don't know whether you've got...
I've always had very fair dealings with Wes, but,
stories are starting to appear about him that he's actually not a very nice bloke. Extraordinary stuff. Let's have a look at what Starmer did when he was asked by Jack Elson from The Sun about the whole... we played this out a lot yesterday, about the whole business of whether he broke any COVID rules. He's very grumpy, very tetchy. Here he is, Keir Starmer, the face of hypocrisy.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's all we have time for. Thank you.
Of course not.
Was your voice coach definitely a key word?
I mean, it's not a good look, is it? Not a good look.
And Kemi Badenoch has a lot to go on this week at PMQs.
My fear is that she won't even touch it at PMQs.
If she can... What she needs to do, look, putting aside the fact I'm not sure I don't think there can be a police investigation because, as I was saying...
Well, people have now reported him to the police. So the police are now duty-bound to make an investigation.
But the problem is that it's because it happened more than 3 years ago, there's a statute of limitations which would then preclude an investigation. So
I haven't seen that statement from the police. The police said initially, we haven't been asked to investigate it because we haven't had a complaint. Yesterday, a load of people made a complaint.
Yeah. Let's see.
Surely they've got to investigate it.
Let's wait and see. There'll be, they'll have... Look, let's wait and see on the investigation. But can Kemi Badenoch force Keir Starmer's hand to say in the House of Commons that all the rules were followed? And if it then turns out that the rules weren't followed, then he's in trouble. Yeah. And what Keir Starmer did very effectively when he was the leader of the opposition, because he is a lawyer and he knows what to do, was that he set Boris Johnson up at Prime Minister's questions to make statements on the floor of the House of Commons, which were later proved to be untrue. And that was part of the unravelling of Boris Johnson. Yeah. He was very good at it. Can Kemi Badenoch do to Keir Starmer what Keir Starmer did to...
Well, she's meant to be a lawyer as well, isn't she?
Engineer.
Did she not study? No, she's not studying law as well?
She studied... Oh, she did, didn't she? Yeah.
She did study law as well, so she's supposed to be... But this is the other thing that people have said, and Rebecca Butler pointed this out yesterday. Keir Starmer, in his various dealings with, Madam Asquith, the wife of, or the partner of the best soft porn actor in Britain, because I'm just going to keep calling her that, he was paid £18,000 as a lawyer for legal services. She's pointed out and said, well, hang on, he's not registered with the bar. So how is he operating as an actual, cab rank type lawyer? he shouldn't be able to do that. So that's another question that nobody really has an answer for.
And then we just come on to the business of government and what's happened with the Chagos Islands.
Well, we'll get on to that in a minute.
18 million.
Absolutely, we'll get on to that in a minute. The actual, I mean, forget about the ridiculousness of what he's been doing. Now we have to get on to the business of what he's actually doing now, which is also something that people are not happy about. We'll come back to that. Theo Usherwood is here. I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is Morning Glory. We want to hear from you. I mean, Keir Starmer, I think, has gone from 2 days ago the laughing stock of the country to actually now a rather insidious kind of, what can only be described as obstructive, nasty, venal character who actually is deliberately misconstruing the rules of the country and completely and utterly diverting attention away from what he has done wrongly in order to try and preserve his place as Prime Minister. I think it's the most disgraceful act of any politician that I've ever seen. Forget about John Major and his affair with Edwina Currie. Forget about Boris Johnson and his affairs, various affairs, when he was in charge. Forget about his defence of people that had done things that they shouldn't have done. At the end of the day, Keir Starmer is a complete and utter hypocrite, and I'm actually ashamed that he is the leader of this country. Let's hear from you. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Harry's records should be released for everyone to see. We believe that if Harry lied on his immigration application, that's a criminal offence, and he should face deportation if he lied on his application. So let's see exactly what Harry had to say on his application. In his book Spare, his own memoir, he talked about extensive illegal drug use. Harry should be held to account, just like anyone else.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:26. Theo Usherwood is here with us. Nicola from Norfolk says this morning, Mike, you are spot on about Starmer and his sanctimony. He is a disgrace. I really, really, really hope that Kemi finally steps up at PMQs and skewers him on this in a way which he cannot wriggle out of by cracking a rubbish joke. You know, That is the problem. He's very kind of now that he's in the Prime Minister's chair, if you like, in PMQs. He's quite glib, isn't he? He sometimes like dismisses things that are said to him, which are maybe quite serious, and just kind of tries to laugh it off.
Yeah,
I think he's in a bad place here.
He is in a very difficult place, but it is up to, you know, the situation only takes the leader of the opposition so far.
Yeah,
she's got to be able to step in and actually nail.
Yes,
Starmer.
I mean, people said to me yesterday,
and that's the problem.
It's going to be difficult for her because she won't want him to sort of blow back all the stuff about Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson, the fact that they got penalty fines and all of that. But to which I would say, yeah, but they got penalty notices and they had to pay a fine. Well, maybe Keir Starmer should accept one as well. So, you know, either you're in the game for the long run and you can actually have that debate, or you can't. But you can't be frightened of having it.
No, and I don't think she needs to worry. You know, I don't think Kemi Badenoch needs to like worry about the blowback on Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak. She needs to get to the point, and she needs to get to the point where the British public who watch PMQs understand, whether it's live at midday in the House of Commons, or they see it on the news later, or they listen to it here on Talk, or wherever they get it, that Keir Starmer is dodging the question.
They want her to skewer him.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
what they want.
And they want her to get to make it plain as day to them that he cannot answer the question, that all the rules were followed.
Right.
And if she can do that, then it's a job well done. She doesn't necessarily need to have the sound bite this week.
Right.
She doesn't need to have the one-line quip.
Yeah.
She needs to get to the point that Keir Starmer can't say to the House of Commons what he said to Jack Elsom on Monday at that press conference.
Yes.
That's it.
I think that's right. Let's look at Rachel Reeves. She's on the front page of the Times today. Cut spending or taxes must increase. Economists warn Rachel Reeves. Rachel Reeves, possibly the world's worst Chancellor of the Exchequer, with maybe one or two exceptions you might throw in there. But the Office for Budget Responsibility has basically said to her that the state of the economy is such that if she is, and it's now more or less accepted, isn't it, that she's going to make a statement in March.
Yes, she's going to make a statement.
Which she denied for a long time, and which Starmer denied for a long time, but it looks like she's going to do it. But basically they're saying, look, you need to be absolutely clear about what you're going to do here. Are you going to cut spending, or are you going to raise taxes? She can't keep hiding, can she?
So at the moment it's a spending review.
Yeah.
If she wants to raise taxes, then she has to turn it into a budget or a fiscal event.
Right.
So if they start changing the language and they start talking about a fiscal event or budget,
so is there actually a law? Is there actually a
Yeah.
rule that says you can't just make a statement? You have to make a budget or something.
There is a rule that says you can make a statement, but within a spending review statement, you can only cut spending.
Okay.
You can't raise taxes.
Right.
If you want to raise taxes, you have to do a budget.
Okay.
And at the moment, she's saying no budget, no major fiscal event, which means that they are not planning to raise taxes.
Right.
So they're looking at the moment at tax. So
when March comes along and she makes the statement, as it stands, she can't raise taxes.
Yes.
Right.
So if she makes it, if they suddenly start talking about a major fiscal event or a budget, then they're going to raise taxes.
Right.
But there's two things, right? Three things. So there's three ways of raising money. The first is she could borrow more, but she said, the Treasury said absolutely flat no. We're going to reduce debt as a share of GDP over the course of this Parliament, and we're not going to borrow for day-to-day spending. So that's out. So that leaves spending cuts and tax rises. Yeah. Now, if she goes with tax rises, part of the problem, part of the reason we're in this mess, Mike, is that she went and raised taxes by 40 billion quid, and businesses threw their arms up in the air and said, we can't stomach this, we can't, we're going to have to put up our prices, which leads to inflation. And then, of course, interest rates are remaining high. We're hoping that they'll come down tomorrow, but they probably won't. Yeah. Or they're not going to come down as fast over the course. They probably will come down tomorrow, but they won't come down as fast as they might otherwise have done. So she could raise taxes, but if the markets then look at it and think, actually, businesses aren't going to invest here, the UK isn't like a great place to come and put your money and build a factory or set up an office.
Which currently it's not.
Which it plainly isn't after that budget. That's the view. We've got more millionaires leaving. I think it's up 157%, 24 compared to 23 in terms of the number of millionaires.
Well, I've been laughingly suggesting that's why they need a third runway at Heathrow for all the millionaires that are flying out on their private jets. You know, just go bye-bye, see ya, night-night.
So we've got that. We've got that element to it as well. So that really leaves spending cuts. But spending cuts won't be easy for the Chancellor because her backbench MPs are going to be, going around telling departments to cut waste, cut benefits. cut incapacity benefits, cut disability
defence budget.
Cut the defence. They don't want to do that.
No.
And Labour MPs are getting very jittery about it. And at the same time, we're giving the Mauritian government 18 billion quid.
You mentioned that, which is a good thing, because we're about to move on to that. Let's get a voice note from Tony on the Chagos Islands scenario.
Morning, Mike. Tony in Stoke-on-Trent. So last night I hear that Keir Starmer has now doubled the £9 billion that he wants to give to Mauritius for the Chagos Islands, up to £18 billion. I know the Chagos Islands don't want these, Mauritius don't want these Chagos Islands, but who's going to turn down £18 billion? And where the hell has he found the money for this? I think this Labour government have come in to power, and this isn't just bad government. This is destruction of our country. This is getting beyond a joke now, mate.
Yeah, Tony, I couldn't agree more. We'll come back to that, because I mean, in what world would I come to you and say, look, here's the thing, Theo, I've got this car, right? I'm going to give it to you. It's a really good car, but I know that you don't really want it. So what I'm going to do, in order to give you the car and convince you it's a good idea for me to give you the car, I'm going to pay you £20,000 a year for the next 10 years for you to take the car off my hands.
But in
what world is that
I tell you, in Starmer worlds, there has been a ruling by an international court that means that you have to do that. Non-binding, but you adhere to international law.
But that's absolute BS, isn't it? Absolute rubbish. I mean, if some bloke from Brussels came over to me from The Hague and went, you have to sell that car to Theo Usherwood, I'd go, you know what? See these two fingers? There they are. Get stuffed. Anyway, we'll come back to that because, of course, the country is being run by a man who is completely incapable of running his own life. That's the problem. He thinks it's a good idea to bring a woman who is not his wife into his Labour Party headquarters on Christmas Eve, wearing a mask, a reasonably comely-looking individual, and he claims that she was teaching him how to speak. Well, we all know that he can't speak. So she wasn't doing that, was she? What was she doing with her mouth? That's what I want to know. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:36. I'm Mike Graham. Theo Usherwood is here with us. How about this from James in Manchester? Morning, Mike. How glorious would it be to have the famous Sue Gray investigate Starmer's COVID conduct? Please make it happen. That would be great, wouldn't it? Bring her out of retirement. Somebody mentioned it yesterday. She's in the House of Lords, of course, so she's probably got far more important things to do. I'm not waiting for her maiden speech. I don't know what it's going to be about. But Sue Gray famously, of course, was the one who supposedly put together the investigation into Boris Johnson and Partygate, which led to him inevitably resigning. A lot of people say, well, of course he resigned for all sorts of other reasons. But, well, yeah, but the point is that that was her job. Maybe she should do an investigation into Starmer and the voice coach and the mask and all the rest of it. We'll come back to that. Let's get a voice note from James.
Morning, Mike. James from Blackburn. Oh, it's murky, isn't it, this? Another murky morning for Starmer. Do you know what, Mike? I don't even think I want to know what was going on. Oof, maybe we should just leave this one alone. Oh, dear me. Dear me, is it only Wednesday? If you were going to sum up their week already, it'd be... Keep up the good work.
Yeah, there's definitely a tickling of the tonsils scenario going on with the old voice coach. I don't know. That's not for me to say. That would be wrong for me to speculate in any way, shape or form, obviously. And, of course, I'm not going to do that. But what we should do is talk to Tom Packer, the fellow of the UCL Centre for US Politics, because overnight, if you woke up this morning and you were paying attention, you would have heard Donald Trump saying a great many things about the whole situation in Gaza. He met with Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday. And let's have a look at some of the things, before we talk to Tom, that Trump said.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area.
I'm not even sure that the US can take over Gaza, but here's what Trump's plan is. I think presumably he's going to put a Trump casino in, Trump hotel, you know, a couple of Trump
we have an
plazas.
opportunity to do something that could be phenomenal. And I don't want to be cute, I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so this could be so magnificent. But more importantly than that is the people that have been absolutely destroyed that live there now can live in peace in a much better situation because they're living in hell. And those people will now be able to live in peace. We'll make sure that it's done world class. It'll be wonderful for the people. Palestinians mostly we're talking about. And I have a feeling that despite them saying no, I have a feeling that the king in Jordan and that the general president, but that the general in Egypt will open their hearts and will give us the kind of land that we need to get this done. And people can live in harmony and in peace. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I mean, we're sort of slightly laughing at what he said, but I mean, there's some validity to it. Let's talk to Tom Packer. Tom, very good morning to you. I mean, there is a kind of Trumpian common sense about all of this, isn't there? Because he's right. You know, there is no doubt that part of Gaza, for a long time, even during the time of the bombardment from Israel, there is a part of Gaza which is on the Mediterranean Sea, which is actually rather pleasant. You know, there are people that have houses there that have not been destroyed. There are people that live there who have not been subsumed into the kind of wasteland of Israeli attacks. And it's a very beautiful part of the world. Yes, Gaza right now is completely, southern Gaza particularly, completely destroyed. But has he got a point? What do you think?
I think he has a bit of a point. So it's undoubtedly true that it could be a lot better than it is. I mean, one reason for that, of course, is before October it was a lot better.
Yeah.
You know, before October 23, right. It was a lot better. So that's not a mystery. Maybe if the US came in as the temporary occupying force, the theory might be that the Israelis wouldn't do anything because they'd be worried about upsetting the US, and the Palestinians organised different, not just Hamas, but other organised Palestinian terror groups like Islamic Jihad wouldn't do things because if they bomb the Americans, Trump would just pull out and tell the Israelis you can do whatever you want. I do also think there's been a slight negotiating point, which there's been a very strong consensus throughout everywhere, except for some degree in Israel, that Palestinians can't leave Gaza. And this is quite unusual for a war. So, of course, we've had like hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians come into Britain. Now, imagine how much higher the casualties in Ukraine would be if every European country had said, no way, this is giving in to Putin. We're not allowing a single Ukrainian over. There is also perhaps a negotiating point. If the Palestinians feel they can never, ever be kicked out the way Germans were kicked out of Eastern Europe in the 40s, they'll just need to keep fighting and they'll win. Then, in a sense, it's Trump's instinct for negotiation to give a worst-case scenario for Hamas than just being pulverized by Israel.
Right.
Having said that, like, the governments of Egypt and Jordan and the other Arab countries around are very hostile. There's reason to believe they might get overthrown by their own population if they did this. Where Palestinians have moved in large numbers to other countries, they've been very politically destabilizing. So the Lebanese civil war was sparked off by having a large number of Palestinians.
Well, nobody wants the Palestinians to move into their country. It's why Egypt won't allow them to live there. Why Jordan doesn't want them, because they view them as terrorists.
I mean, obviously it depends. Some Palestinians are terrorists, some aren't. But Jordan, of course, is...
Well, I'm talking about... I'm not saying they're terrorists. I'm saying that Jordan and Egypt view them as terrorists. That's because their experience of Black September, their experience of Yasser Arafat, their experience of the PLO, is that if you allow Palestinians into your country, they cause problems.
Well, Jordan is a very interesting case because Jordan, of course, was carved out of the mandate that became both Israel and these various disputed territories before World War II. Jordan actually has a Palestinian majority. The mother, I think, of the current king, or the wife, I forget which, is Palestinian. But most of the political power is held by the non-Palestinian Arabs, the ones who are closest to the Arabian Peninsula, the ruling dynasty, who actually used to rule.
But the rule of thumb has always been, has it not, Tom, in the Middle East, that the Palestinians are the kind of, the unwanted group of people that nobody actually wants to help. Because,
I think there's a lot in that, but it's also combined with partly because it's seen as part of Arab nationalism and part of defending Islam, very strong support, particularly by the general public, of the Palestinian cause. One interesting thing about Trump last time is there'd be this very strong consensus in the West, at least. The only way you make progress on some kind of permanent peace between Arab countries like Qatar and Israel and Saudi and Qatar's a bad example, sorry, like Saudi Arabia and the Israelis, was by embracing the Palestinian cause and giving the Palestinians a state. But Trump actually made a lot of progress on that without really doing anything on the Palestinian.
But until October the 7th of 2023, the Abraham Accords were actually proving that didn't actually matter. And that's why a lot of people believe that Hamas decided to launch that attack, because they knew that they were being marginalised. They knew that actually the newfound kind of compact that was being made between the UAE and Israel and Saudi was actually going to kill off any kind of hope for Palestine to get their own state, because it didn't matter.
I think that probably was part of it. I think also they didn't expect the strength of the Israeli reaction. Partly, I think, frankly, because Trump wasn't president, so they thought there'd be too much pressure on Israel.
So what does if there were to be some kind of American presence in Gaza, what does that look like?
I don't think, the way Trump worded it almost sounded like the US would take over. I mean, the US definitely wouldn't want Gaza. I'm quite sure Trump doesn't want lots of Palestinians in the United States. So I think it would be true, like reconstruction crews, quite possibly not actually American, and some US troops to supervise them. I suspect it won't happen. I think there'll be a lot of discontent in the US about it, a lot of discontent among the Palestinians. It's not very obviously in the US national interest. I think to some degree, and I think Middle East is an issue where you should give Trump some credit for actually having instincts that others don't. It's about reshaping the negotiation, making the Israelis and Hamas feel there could actually be a worse scenario than just the status quo, so they actually feel the incentive to do a deal.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Tom, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Tom Packer, Fellow of the UCL Centre for US Politics. Let's have another listen to another clip from Donald Trump last night, where he talks about what would happen if Iran assassinated him.
That would be a terrible thing for them to do, not because of me. If they did that, they would be obliterated. That would be the end. I've left instructions. If they do it, they get obliterated. There won't be anything left. And they shouldn't be able to do it. And Biden should have said that, but he never did. I don't know why, lack of intelligence, perhaps. But he never said it. If that happens to a leader, or close to a leader, frankly, if you had other people involved also, you would call for total obliteration of a state that did it. That would include Iran. So I'm signing this, and it's a very powerful document, but hopefully we're not going to have to use it.
It's so refreshing, isn't it, Theo, to have this guy in charge? And I know that people will say, well, you know, he says a lot of things which can't happen. He says a lot of things which are dangerous. But he literally is getting so much done. And he's getting so much kind of, you know, kudos for it from his supporters.
I don't know what Hamas and Iran expected to happen.
Right.
You know, Hamas is still holding a baby hostage.
Yeah, I know.
You know,
absolutely disgraceful.
It's just
disgusting.
It's
scumbags.
It's.
And the way that they treat the hostages as they release them as well.
And we've seen the pictures of the way they've been behaving. And so, you know, Trump was able to get Netanyahu. He was able to get Netanyahu to accept a ceasefire. And actually, if you look at the actual ceasefire, you know, in terms of the exchanges, we're talking hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. Many of them who were locked up by the Israelis for some
very good reasons,
horrific crimes, terrorist crimes, in exchange for just a handful of the hostages, many of whom previously killed, and there are many who remain in captivity. You know, the way that he managed to persuade Netanyahu, and it all seems to be coming to light now, to accept this is to take a really hard line on what happens to Gaza next. I don't know any world. You know, people like to single out Israel, but I don't know any world leader. Would we expect it of our world leader if there was if a terrorist organisation came into this country, took hostages?
Right. Well, imagine if, say, the IRA had done it. Imagine if the IRA had come to London, taken a load of hostages, and gone back to Belfast and put them in a sort of, you know,
and killed 1,200 people while they
were doing it, and then took them all back to Belfast and buried them sort of under the ground, and we were left, you know, trying to figure out how to get them out.
And then it would be
carnage, wouldn't it?
And we'd say to the IRA, yes, we're going to give you your own state.
I mean, we would have destroyed Belfast for that.
And I don't. Trump, and this is, I think Tom makes a very important point there. You know, he's the master at teeing up a stronger negotiating position.
Yes.
So before the negotiation even starts, what he's done is said, you get your act together, because this is a Netanyahu who's next to him. Get your act together, otherwise what's going to happen is this is going to be the solution.
Yeah.
And that should force Hamas now and Iran to suddenly go, okay, this guy means business.
Yeah.
And about time too.
Yeah, absolutely.
About time too.
I think you're right. Coming up, we're going to talk about Lucy Letby. She's on a lot of the front pages this morning. A massive attempt yesterday was made to prove that actually her conviction was unsafe. Peter Hitchens has long said it. We'll be talking to him about this tomorrow, I'm sure. But not only that, but why you're all happier in the morning. I can tell you why. Because Morning Glory has cheered you all up. It's as simple as that. This is Talk. Bye.
they've got a lot more power to take on Donald Trump. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I don't think China are going to back down. That's the one thing that you know from them, is that they are pretty sure, with all of the minerals, as you've said, which make all of the chips and solar technology
and mobile phones.
Yeah, so
none of the stuff we use.
No, everything we take for granted they've got. And so they'll just sit there and go, OK, fine, we're going to impose these rules on you.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is Morning Glory, and it is the place to be. It is the home of common sense. It is the one world headquarters of everything that needs to be said when it needs to be said. And sometimes we say things ahead of everybody else. Tony says this: Sir Keir Starmer cannot support President Trump on displacing Gazans. If he does, he's finished. That's an interesting point, actually, Theo, isn't it? Because if he does that, and he looks to the left, I suppose, of his party, and he looks at the Muslim vote and all the rest of it, they will be very, very hard-pressed to agree with anything that Donald Trump says about this.
It's a really good point, and I think it's going to become this is going to become really problematic for Keir Starmer. We saw what happened on Monday, right?
Yeah.
Trump comes out and says, well, we're going to give the UK. He hints, doesn't he? Suggests that actually the UK is going to. He doesn't treat them in the same bracket as the European Union. Describes the EU when it comes to tariffs as an atrocity, and he wants to rebalance rebalance. UK, it can be salvageable, according to Donald
He's more,
Trump,
right? They're out of line, but they're okay.
They're okay. We can fix it. So Starmer goes to the EU. And then he's asked about it in the press conference, are you going to back the likes of French President Emmanuel Macron and turn around and say that you're going to push back against tariffs in the EU? Starmer actually plays his cards relatively okay and says, well, I'm just going to stay out of this, I'm going to be in the middle. But we have the same thing here, because except now it's affecting his domestic politics rather than any ambitions that he has in Europe. Because Trump's come out with this really hard line. What is going to be his position? Is he going to say, is he going to condemn Donald Trump? Because the Labour MPs are going to be queuing up,
of course they are,
waiting for Keir Starmer to come down in the strongest possible terms against Donald Trump.
But this is going to be the history and the future as well of Keir Starmer's now prime ministership, because he's going to have to be reacting all the time to whatever Donald Trump says he's going to do on a whole variety of things.
But never actually.
And if he starts like punishing the EU, for example, and saying, you guys are atrocious, as he has said, you're way out of line, $350 billion deficit on trade. I'm going to punish you. I'm going to kick you in the guts. I'm going to kick you in the gonads, whatever it is. He's going to have to either say nothing or come out and go, I'm not really sure I agree with Donald Trump on this.
But if he says nothing, do you think that's going to go down well with the European Union at the time when he wants those close relationships?
Exactly right.
He's falling between the stools.
He really is. And he'll make a complete and utter dog's breakfast of it. Let's talk about Lucy Letby, though, because Dr. Shu Lee came to this country yesterday. He's the president of the Canadian Neonatal Foundation, and basically he's the guy for whom, unbeknownst to him, if you like, his evidence of how young children, babies die, was used in the Lucy Letby case. He says wrongly, and he's now more or less withdrawn his tacit support for them. Let's have a look.
In summary, ladies and gentlemen, we did not find any murders. In all cases, death or injury were due to natural causes or just bad medical care. Lucy was charged with 7 murders and 7 attempted murders. In our opinion, the medical evidence doesn't support murder in any of these babies, just natural causes and bad medical care. Our full report will go to Lucy's barrister later this month. And then it'll be up to him and the courts to decide what next to do.
I mean, this guy is a very estimable character, Dr. Shu Lee, a world-renowned expert on neonatal death. He's basically saying that this was the wrong decision, that she should never have been prosecuted. In no one of the 14 cases did they have any evidence for murder. The Telegraph this morning says Letby did not kill a single baby, obviously reporting that press conference. On the front page of the Mail, they go a slightly different way. Distraught mother of Letby victim hits out a disrespectful campaign to free her. I think that's less of a story. This is a remarkable story. I mean, I don't know about you, but when it first started, I mean, Peter Hitchens had raised questions about this case for many months on this show, and I'd always said, well, you know, they went through the proper process, there was a court hearing, there was a jury trial, you know, it seems to me that on the balance of probabilities, the jury decided that she was guilty, and so therefore she probably is. But I'm now wondering if I got that wrong.
Yeah, it's a very difficult one because, of course, neither of us are experts in.
And I didn't see it in the court. I didn't hear all the evidence.
So you feel like when I was at the press conference yesterday, and the Dr. Shu Lee is literally, he went through, and it was heartbreaking in many cases just to hear the details. But he went through about half a dozen of each of the babies that were brought to his attention that he was asked to examine, looking at post-mortem reports and clinical reports. And the premise of this case and the way that it was the way he told the story was that in each case the allegation against, which was found, you know, Lucy Letby was convicted of murder in 7 instances and attempted murder in 7 others. But the premise seemed to be that Lucy Letby had injected air into the veins of one of these children or into the stomach of one of the children in order to cause their death, to murder them.
But one of the questions, of course, that's come up is that, you know, in all of the cases that she was accused of doing that, in many of them she wasn't even in the room.
Yes, and what's also
it turns out,
and what Shu Lee was at pains to put out was not that she hadn't done this, but in each of the cases there was a plausible explanation as to why the child had died. In many of the cases, the child was really sick. One of the cases
because they were all children who were suffering in a bad way in a neonatal ward anyway. Right?
And he pointed to the fact that one of the doctors failed to give the mother antibiotics in labour, and the child was born with a really severe infection. In another case, they had a really severe respiratory disease. If this goes all the way, or what I would say is, if this goes all the way to the Court of Appeal and then there's a retrial and Lucy Letby is acquitted, there have got to be some serious questions for the NHS.
Totally. And
what
also,
has gone on?
And
here?
also, totally, an awful lot of questions for the government, because the government, up to now, have been incredibly careful and said, we do not want this trial reopened, we do not want this trial rescinded, all of that. Theo, good to see you. We're out of time, unfortunately. This is Morning Glory.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public is not being told the truth.
No. There's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that Biden has approved.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It is coming up to nearly 3 minutes past 7. It's still very dark out there, so we don't know what sort of sunrise is happening, but I can see some imitation, shall we say, of some warm glows coming out from the east, and so it might be a very nice day. It was a lovely day yesterday. I had a bit of an adventure, actually, in Mayfair. Went to a part of London which I don't normally go to. Incredible wealth, by the way. I mean, you walk around there, you can't quite believe that this is the same part of London that maybe like 2 minutes down the road in Piccadilly Circus or in Oxford Street is completely overrun with shoplifters, ram raiders, watch thieves and all the rest of it. There's security guards everywhere. There's Bentleys all over the place. I saw about 5 different types of Rolls Royce. I mean, incredibly wealthy part of the world. A very nice place to go for lunch, which is what I did. Watch shops everywhere, foreign nationals walking around the streets, nobody seemingly with a care in the world. So maybe all is not lost. So that's what I'm going to say this morning, and I'll tell you a bit more about my day as it goes. Let's get a voice note from James, the voice coach.
Good morning, Mike. So I see great leader's got himself a voice coach then. Cool, blimey. I'll certainly ask my money back. She ain't got a hope in hell with training him. Also, I heard he suffers with stage fright. I think you picked the wrong job, Mr. Starmer.
Yeah, I mean, what sort of a bloke who's supposed to be an international barrister, a human rights lawyer, who spends his time in courtrooms, suffers from stage fright when he's supposed to be speaking in public? More and more interesting, shall we say, the snippets of information are coming out about the voice coach. We'll bring you those shortly. But what we do know about her is that not only does she travel 50 miles from Brighton to London and back on December the 24th, 2020, when she was invited to come and see Keir Starmer, the leader of the opposition, in the headquarters of the Labour Party. Not only that, but she was a very vociferous critic, shall we say, of Boris Johnson's COVID policy, continually retweeting things that Keir Starmer has said, continually having a go at Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister. And also, her husband apparently paid about 18,000 quid to Keir Starmer for some legal services. It's all very murky, it's all very dodgy, it's all very difficult, and if Keir Starmer thinks he can get away without answering any questions at all, and simply by saying, no, absolutely not, don't be ridiculous, of course I didn't break any COVID rules, well, I'm afraid, Prime Minister, that's not good enough. You work for us, you do not have the divine right to tell us what to do. You do not have the divine right to lord it over us. You do not have the divine right to tell us to back off. No, you need to answer our questions, because we are the people who put you in the job that you're in. We are the people who pay your bleeding salary, you disgusting, disgraceful hypocrite of the highest order. So get yourself in line, get your house in order, and tell us exactly what you were doing with the voice coach on December the 24th, 2020. A bit like the question that was asked by the editor of the Washington Post to one of the people who was involved in Watergate. And he said, look, I don't care what you said to the voice coach in your apartment. I don't care what happened to the voice coach in the apartment. I just want to know what she was doing in your apartment. It's as simple as that. What was she doing there? Why did you have to bring her in? under Tier 4 restriction. Doesn't make any sense at all. Diana in London says, my body clock wakes me up at 5:55 each morning, just in time to start listening to your incredible show. Thank you for everything you do for the people, Diane. I'm very, very happy to do so. Diana, I should say. Lucy Letby's a big story in the papers this morning. We haven't even got telling you that every 5 minutes is going to be a famine. You know, all you need to do is get the Red Cross on. If I made a call to the Red Cross now, they'd be like, people are starving, people haven't got any food, they haven't got any homes, they haven't got any, you know, blood transfusion services, they've got no hospitals. Really? Well, I mean, all those people that were walking back to northern Gaza to go back after the Israeli bombardment had stopped, they were all supposed to have been killed, weren't they? I mean, there's so much ridiculous anti-Israeli propaganda that I'm getting pretty damn sick of it. So Keir Starmer cannot support President Donald Trump, said Tony, and we mentioned this earlier. If he does, he's in a bad place. How does that play out for him? How does Starmer manage to continue to be Prime Minister without having a view on how does Trump and Israel? Mick says this, I can't understand why Labour MPs are allowing Starmer to destroy the country. At the next election, they're all out. Are they sheep? Good question. Let's talk to James Heal, the political correspondent at The Spectator. James, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
I mean, as if there wasn't enough problems for Keir Starmer, and we'll get on to the in a minute. Imagine if he was somebody who had said in the past, anyone who breaks the rules on COVID should absolutely and utterly be stripped of all rights to be a politician. I can't imagine if we could find a clip that would say anything like that, but let's have a look at this one.
Doesn't the Prime Minister realise that John would have given the world to hold his dying wife's hand, even if it was just for 9 minutes? But he didn't, because he followed the Prime Minister's rules. Rules that we now know the Prime Minister blithely, repeatedly and deliberately ignored.
Yeah. You know, there's a problem with deliberately ignoring rules, isn't there? You tend to get your comeuppance at some point or other. Boris Johnson ceased to be Prime Minister because of his disregard for the rules. Starmer's in a bad place here, isn't he?
I think it's a pretty awkward situation, certainly.
Yeah.
And I think that's shown by the fact that Number 10 don't want to answer any questions about what happened before he was Prime Minister.
Right.
So I think there's a very strong likelihood, Mike, that today you're going to see the situation reversed and Kerry Badenoch at Prime Minister's questions asking Keir Starmer at least a couple of questions about what on earth, as you say, that voice artist was doing on Christmas Eve 2020.
Right. Well, I mean, you and I have been doing this for a long time. You've slightly not quite as long as I have. But, you know, when I look at this woman, you know, Leonie Mellinger, or Mellinger as I like to call her, you know, there are so many questions that you want to ask. You know, she was married to a guy who starred as Robin Asquith in various different soft porn films in the 70s, which I'm old enough to remember, initially starring in Confessions of a Window Cleaner. She's very much part of that whole kind of, you know, 70s vibe. It was like Pan's people that used to dance around on top of the pops. You know, that also, do you remember that woman who was Tony Blair's nemesis, who ended up, Carol, what was her name? Can't remember. Who ended up having to leave Downing Street because she was it turned out had a sort of herbal assisted shower with either Tony Blair or her Carol Kaplan. That was it. With his wife. It was all a bit it was all a bit racy. It was all a bit kind of like ooh, blimey. And this has got the same vibe to it for me. This woman who was quite happy to contend to do the job that she did on Zoom for quite a long time until Christmas Eve of 2020, when everybody was told, you can't go home for Christmas, you can't see your parents, you can't see your grandparents, you can't travel to Shropshire, you certainly can't travel in London in Tier 4 to go to work unless you absolutely have to. We're talking to Dan Hodges later in the show, and he put out a tweet yesterday saying, well, it said you can go to work if you can't work from home. Well, except she worked from home for most of the time. She also put out a tweet, as it turns out, 3 months after the Christmas shenanigans, saying, isn't it great to be back working in person again with people, as if to say that she hadn't been doing it before. So if she did go to Downing Street, which we know she did because she put a picture out of herself wearing a mask there, she put a picture out of her trip on the train when nobody was on it, she clearly, as far as we know, in terms of her social media, was not going there for work.
Well, I think the danger is for Downing Street is that you do get another information gap between what you're being told about and what people want answered.
Right.
And I think in this case, given how much political capital Keir Starmer made out of Boris Johnson and lockdown,
right,
it just seemed right to be able to get a few answers to some of these questions. As you say, Mike, I mean, the rules were extremely strict. I remember writing stories, and it was like sort of the last days of Saigon or something. Everyone was pulling out of those stations in December 2020, just after lockdown was announced, leaked out on the Saturday. And it just seems rather striking that the fact that this person had to travel, we believe it's reported 50 miles from a Tier 3 zone to a Tier 4 zone.
Right, which you weren't supposed to do unless it was absolutely necessary.
Absolutely, and without, as you say, when other clients she's working for, obviously appreciate the fact that leader of the opposition is quite a big job, but still, it does seem odd to do it at that point.
No, I'm sorry. I mean, Harry Cole, we spoke to yesterday from The Sun, he said he remembers very, very well that there was a press conference in Downing Street on that very day, I think, on Christmas Eve, and they were all told in various different offices around London, do not come to Downing Street for the press conference, we're going to do it all on Zoom. So, if that's not telling, what you might call key workers, which we all were because we were all information gatherers and information suppliers, and I was certainly one, I had a key workers card, you can't tell me that a voice coach who has previously done everything on Zoom suddenly needs to come to London to give Keir Starmer an emergency voice coach lesson on Christmas Eve. I'm not buying it. It's absolute BS, isn't it?
I think that lots of people will be asking that. And also, just again, the way in which Keir Starmer campaigned on this with such confidence, as you say, it does suggest that lots of his anger and comments about COVID throughout 2021 and 2022 were somewhat overblown, to say the least.
Yeah. No question at all. The question, I suppose, really is, where does this leave Starmer? Having started every single week that I've come into this job and sat in this chair and wondered how much worse it can get for Labour, this is an even further admonishment and a kind of embarrassment for the Labour Party and for the Prime Minister. He swans around, he goes to Brussels, he makes out that he's, Mr. Big with NATO. He has a meeting with the leader of Denmark yesterday. So far, he still hasn't been invited to go to America and visit the White House. It was pointed out to me earlier today that now that Donald Trump's talking about rebuilding Gaza and telling the people from Gaza that don't bother going back home because, the place is absolutely and utterly a ruin, it's a complete and utterly destructed area, he's got a problem with that as well, because if he supports Donald Trump, because he has to, he's going to be hated by the rest of his party.
Absolutely, and I think Keir Starmer is just the latest British Prime Minister to face the eternal dilemma of going to Europe or America. The danger is, of course, is that you now have a very, shall we say, low spending and low growth Europe, which is making certain demands, facing an insurgent pressure across the continent, while also having the unorthodox approach, shall we say, of Donald Trump. And the danger is with Keir Starmer is that he tries to be all things to all men and ends up being none of them.
Yeah.
And I do wonder if the China reset, if the Europe reset, if that's going to come at the right time. And I do think that it's going to be difficult to see, given some of the attitudes in Europe, how much he can really get from that continent when they want to talk more about fisheries in some areas than they do about defence. And Europe has had successive wake-up calls. Donald Trump was elected first in 2016, been almost a decade, and frankly, Europe has still not got its house in order. So I do think that it's going to be very difficult to keep both the Europeans and the Americans happy over the coming months. And as you say, not least because of Gaza, which has obviously been a huge fault line for the Labour Party since 2023.
And also, you know, he was given a bit of a kind of respite, I suppose, because last weekend, you know, we learned that Donald Trump had actually made the phone call to him. They claimed it was 41 minutes or whatever it was. Nobody really cares, you know. But we're now on to the next kind of scale of embarrassment, because I believe very firmly that Donald Trump is playing with him and kind of toying with him and messing about with him. He's already called the EU atrocious. He's already said that, you know, their budget, their trade deficit, $350 billion, is not acceptable. They buy none of our cars. You know, they buy none of our goods. What's the point of them? You know, he's in a bad place until, and as such, he gets the invite to the White House. He's an outlier, isn't he?
I think that we just don't feature much in his concerns right now.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways he's more defined by his enemies than his allies. And right now he's looking at his nearest neighbours and the European Union, and those are the ones at the top of his hit list. Protectionism is one of the few beliefs he's sort of had for the past 40 years. Yeah. He's always believed in tariffs, and I think he's always had a real antipathy towards the European Union, and you see that in his early actions. So it just seems odd right now to get too close to the EU, given, I think, how actually if we play this game very well, we could potentially duck and dive between the two blocks and try and make the best of it.
Right. But, I mean, Starmer's version of that is that I better go to the EU and strengthen the ties between us and them, even to the point where somebody actually asked a question. I think it was a Times reporter asked the question to the head of NATO, how are you going to go forward without America's support? And he just rubbished it. He was like, what are you talking about? Why would we do that? You know, of course America needs to be part of NATO. Without America, there is no NATO. And so this whole idea of sort of, you know, European, you know, UDI, if you like, you know, we're going to set up our own kind of defence scenario. We don't need America. It's complete and utter cobblers.
Completely. And you know, for 80 years, Europe has willingly put itself as America's defence partners. We've entirely been dependent on the American defence shield, and now to somehow pretend that we're better than them just because they've elected Donald Trump, I think would be both insulting and incredibly short-sighted as well.
Totally. And finally, one on the Chagos Islands, which we still think Donald Trump might rescue from oblivion. But Keir Starmer not convinced with giving the islands away to Mauritius, even though they don't particularly want them, and paying them loads and loads of money to do so. He's now saying, actually, you know what? When I offered you $9 billion, that wasn't really enough. I'm going to give you 18 billion now. I mean, I said to Theo Usherwood, it's like me saying to him, look, I've got this second-hand car that I want to give you. You, normally speaking, would buy it from me, but actually I'm going to give it to you for free, and also I'm going to just keep paying you like tens of thousands of pounds over the next 2 years while you drive around in it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a one-man binny board, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, he's getting against himself. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's always that line, isn't there, about sort of heaven is a place where the cooks are French and the queues are British, etc. I mean, hell is a place where the Brits are the negotiators, because it just does seem that this deal is getting worse. I mean, I find very little justification for it. You've only got to think that maybe there's some security element that they can't talk about. But it does seem extremely odd that they press on investing more and more. I think the total cost over a number of years is now going to be up to 18 billion.
Yeah.
And of course, how was it announced, Mike? It was announced by the Mauritian Prime Minister to a foreign parliament rather than the Foreign Secretary here in London.
I mean, won't the Speaker of the House have something to say about that? I mean, you never really know, do you? But, I mean, you know, it's another bizarre week in the world of international politics and Keir Starmer's world. But there we are. Listen, great to talk to you, James. Thank you very much indeed. James Hill, political correspondent of The Spectator. Here's one from Lisa. Mike, good morning. The world is ramping up and all sorts of things are happening now politically. Trump is shaking things up. Is Starmer the right person to lead us? I fear not. Too weak, and he has no worldly experience. He only knows how to paint and fix simple foundations. Great show. Fixing the foundations, yes. Of course, he learned how to say that thanks to his voice coach. Fixing the foundations, who's pictured in the Daily Mail, topless, by the way, in a porn film that she was in some years ago. Well, it may not have been a porn film, but, you know, she's not wearing anything. I don't know. Let's get a word from Phil.
Morning, Mike. Phil from Hertfordshire. Description. All I can think of that this Labour government are doing to this country, this great country of ours, and that's sabotage. And whoever wins the next election, are they going to have one hell of a job to put it back together again?
You have to say, you can't argue with that, really. I mean, this man, Starmer, is literally a one-man wrecking ball who is wrecking the hell out of the government of the United Kingdom and also wrecking the hell out of the history and the culture of the United Kingdom. He loves foreigners, he loves migrants, he loves human rights. He doesn't like, actually, British people at all. I've written about this before in the past, and I'm convinced more than ever that the man is an enemy of the people. I'm sorry. He's not an enemy of all the people, just British people. Here's one from Emma in Wiltshire who says, "Morning, Mike. Do you reckon the Labour Party got a bit of a job lot on the voice coach? What with Keir, Richard III and Ed Miliband all sounding pretty much the same?" It's true. We're fixing the foundations, and later on today it will be Prime Minister questions, at which time I will be very, very clear on what it is that I've been doing with the voice coach. She's been helping me with my diction. Sorry, what was that? Diction, you say? Right. Thought you said something else for a minute. It's 21 minutes past 7.
Government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high, and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, and can you please be clear? Will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this Parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence. She has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
25 minutes past 7. Just had a great story which I can't repeat, but I'll try to do it in some way, shape or form over the course of time. The Chagos Islands are likely to cede the sovereignty. We are apparently still on course to give them away. Nobody thinks it's a good idea. There is nobody in the world that thinks it's a good idea. There's some bozo in the international courts of Strasbourg or somewhere decided that we should give the Chagos Islands back to the people. The people of Chagos don't want us to give it back to them. They want to be British. But not only are we now going to give them back and spend £9 billion for the privilege, we're actually going to give them £18 billion for the privilege. It's absolute madness. Keir Starmer's an idiot. I mean, not only is he a hypocrite, not only is he a disingenuous, dishonest, absolute scumbag, but he's a liar. He's an idiot. Unbelievable. Let's talk now, though, to Oscar Brand, who's a journalist in Gothenburg in Sweden. There was a terrible story yesterday that we reported on here on Talk, where a man went on the rampage with a gun and unfortunately managed to kill, I think, 10 people. As far as we know, 11 people, I think the count is now. My apologies. Oscar, a very good morning to you. Hello, Oscar.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us.
Hello.
It's an awful story. I'm hoping you can hear me okay. Can you tell us what the latest is on what we know about the assailant? We believe, I think, that the man who shot the people in Sweden is also one of the casualties, right?
Yes, I think so. And he is a 35-year-old man, unemployed and socially withdrawn. This is a unconfirmed story by the evening paper Aftonbladet and repeated by the Gothenburg Post paper. So I think it's true. He had a history of psychological issues and limited contact with family and friends. He obtained a firearms license despite his mental struggles. He had no prior criminal record or known connection to police. He moved out from his parents' home in his early 20s. He changed his last name 8 years ago for unknown reasons. He liked to walk his parents' dogs when they were on holiday.
Right. And is there any information about what motivated him to do it? Did he leave a note of any kind? Did he leave any kind of history or clue as to why he would decide to go on this rampage?
I haven't found that. I don't live in Örebro. A friend of mine lives as a fiscal therapist. He works nearby and was locked in his hospital for safety reasons. But I don't live in Örebro. But so I've read this on newspapers. But sorry, what was your question?
Yeah, I mean, it must be a very dark day, I suppose, for people in Sweden. What is the situation there with firearms?
Yeah, no,
how easy is it to get one?
Reasons. It's hard. It's like this is spreading. Like when work gets more stress, when working life gets more stress, and it's harder to find a job and harder to keep a job, and social security goes down. Many people's brains are stressed and many people's brains are not made for stress. So this has happened a lot in USA where the social security system is much worse, and we hope it's not spreading to Sweden now.
No.
Sweden is both very equal and very unequal. If you look at how much the really top income earners do and like how the wealthy capital owners do, we are almost more unequal than Russia and USA, but the bottom level is still very high. But many people are very poor, and poverty is not good for mental health. But I don't say this is the reason, because the state says we want to rest a bit until we know for sure what the true reason was.
No,
but,
sure.
He had a record of unemployment, mental illness, and social awkwardness, social aloneness.
And there was also stories written here just a couple of weeks ago, not even probably, about a kind of rise in lawlessness in Sweden. An awful lot of gang culture suddenly growing up, and a lot of people, being very frightened about, the streets of Sweden becoming a lot more dangerous.
There are two aspects to this. One is that the total crime rate has gone down from 1.24 per 100,000 citizens or something in the 1970s to 1.08 per 100,000 citizens. So it's still very low. We are higher than some countries in Europe. But when you cut down welfare, when it's harder to get a job, when it's harder to keep a job, it's true all over the world that then lawlessness increased. But Sweden is a very safe country. And
well, the Prime Minister admitted. The Prime Minister admitted the other day, we've lost control of the streets. We are engulfed by a crime wave of rape, gang bombings, and assassinations. And there's even been a reported lynching.
No lynching, what I've heard, but
well, there has been a lynching.
The government
that's what the Prime Minister has been talking about.
I didn't know that. But
well, you might not know about it, but I mean that is what people are saying about Sweden.
Yeah, Sweden is a very safe country still. It's not as bad as they say. But when you cut down,
the Prime Minister says it's bad. You know, surely he's right, isn't he?
He is for one part of the EU, and he votes with the Sweden Democrats, an extreme right-wing party. So he has a different agenda, and the government is expanding prison.
So you're
numbers,
saying it's the fault of the right wing that people are being killed. So the fact is that this man shot 11 people, including himself, because he was somehow betrayed by the right wing. Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't say that. But I say that there is statistically a connection between unemployment, poverty, and...
No, that's rubbish. I'm sorry. I mean, I've been unemployed in my life. I didn't decide to go around shooting people. That's ridiculous.
No, on the individual level, we always have a choice.
Well, you can't. No, you can't. You can't. I'm sorry. There are dead people on the streets of Sweden, and you're trying to make out that it's something to do with the welfare state. I think that's pretty disgraceful, actually, to be honest, Oscar.
Okay, yeah, I think it's a horrible thing he did. Nothing can excuse him. Nothing can excuse him. I don't know what the cause is.
Right.
Nobody
well,
knows
let's not try and blame it on the fact that he didn't get enough help in the youth club. You know, he's a complete maniac. He's threatened and killed people and basically ended an awful lot of families' lives for them. You know, let's not get political about it.
He's done a horrible thing. That is all I can say.
Yeah, I think that's probably all you should say. Oscar, thank you very much indeed. Let's never talk to Oscar Brandt again, journalist in Gothenburg. A complete plank, I'm afraid. I don't know what the word is in Swedish for plank. Let's get a voice note from Richard.
Hello, Mike. It's Richard here from Crowborough. Just like to talk to you about Sir Keir Starmer, really. During the Beergate situation in, I think it was Durham, he was backed into a corner and he said, oh, anyone who thinks nobody works after 10 o'clock at night is a fool, or words to that effect. And that was just such a classic lawyer's deflection technique, because by saying something that nobody could disagree with, i.e. people work after 10 o'clock, that was designed to make us think about other people. But actually, we weren't talking about other people. We were talking about Sir Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. And I thought to myself, don't you ever try to pull the wool over my eyes like that again. I didn't believe him then, and I don't believe him now.
Quite right too. A very good point, Richard, and a very well made one. Chris in Newbury says something similar. So apart from a beer and curry party with colleagues, staying with Lord Ali for a month so his son can do his homework, and shipping a female friend of his family voice coach on Christmas Eve to London while the rest of the country were locked down after Starmer screamed for us to be harder locked down is disgraceful, says Chris. And morning, Mike, says James in Manchester. How glorious would it be to have the famous Sue Gray investigate Starmer and his COVID conduct? Please make it happen. We'll see what we can do. It is ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, Keir Starmer is clearly a hypocrite. There's no question about it now. And the fact is that if he is not put to the sword by Kemi Badenoch in Prime Minister's Questions coming up later on today, she will have proved herself to be of no use whatsoever, I'm afraid. So this is her time. It's time for Kemi to stand up and make herself counted as somebody who actually understands what the people of this country think. And the people of this country are sick to the back teeth of the hypocrisy that completely and utterly runs through the Labour Party like the worst kind of virus. They're suffering from it. They hate Britain. They are hypocrites and they think they can do what they like. Well, it's time to tell them they can't. It's as simple as that. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:37. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. We are here every single weekday morning from 6, giving you 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory, the home of common sense, the place where the nation comes to talk, the place where only yesterday a Tory MP actually thanked me for all of the stuff that I did during COVID and during those years when we were all so terribly, terribly under the thumb and put upon, really, by government regulations, government restrictions. Keir Starmer, of course, didn't seem to care about them. You know, he went to a little beer and curry party up in Durham and said, well, people work after 10 o'clock at night, you know. It's not absolutely out of the question. It now turns out that he invited his good friend, because she was a good friend and probably still is, this woman called Malinga, whatever her name is, brought her into the headquarters of Labour Party on Christmas Eve of 2020. She made a 50-mile round trip to come all that way just to teach him to say, release the sausages. And we will be fixing the foundations. This is a voice coach he apparently had, for heaven's sake. Let's talk to Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, MP, Chair of the Public Accounts Committee, Conservative MP from North Cotswolds, because we found out literally this week that the Home Office has wasted nearly £100 million on plans to house asylum seekers. We also learned today that asylum seekers have basically been given money to spend on PlayStation so that they can play games while they're sitting around doing absolutely nothing, the square root of FA. Thank you very much indeed. We've also learned in recent days that not only do they get given phones and blankets and food when they arrive, pizza sometimes, they get given clothes as well. I mean, you know, the most successful people in this country don't get anything for free. These people get everything for free. So, Geoffrey, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Good to be on your show.
Good to see you. Absolutely incredible it is it not, that the Home Office are so profligate with our money? I mean, why do they think they can just keep spending on our behalf government money, taxpayers' money, on these people who come to this country illegally and who, if they were landing in America now under the Donald Trump regime, would be put straight on a plane and sent back home again?
Well, they should be sent home if they're not entitled to be here. But I think, you know, one thing that would help in all of this is if they were allowed to work much quicker so they could actually start benefiting this country before their cases were decided. And I do think that's a useful change we could make.
But isn't it the case that even though they are technically not allowed to work, that they are all actually working? I mean, if anybody's ever ordered anything from Just Eat or Deliveroo or, you know, any of those other, you know, Uber Eats services that bring you food in the middle of the night when you decide you fancy a curry at 2 in the morning, you know, they're all working. They're just not working in the regular economy. They're working in the black economy.
So you've put your finger on it there, haven't you, Mike? They should be in the regular economy so that we can see who they are, where they are, and if they're paying their taxes. And if they've, you know, then their cases could be processed here, whether they're entitled to be here or not. So, you know, they need to be integrated in society as quickly as possible and then either sent home or, as I say, allowed to be here and allowed to work.
Yes, exactly right. But, you know, how difficult will that be? Because every time anybody tries to do anything with the Home Office, they encounter this incredibly brick wall of sort of silence, because they actually want these people to be able to come here and wreak havoc, it would seem to me. I mean, we had the Home Office review just the other week where it turns out Yvette Cooper commissioned it and then didn't like the results of it, so she says she's not going to pick up on any of their recommendations. But basically they kind of came out and said, you know, Islamic terrorism is all very well, but actually it's much worse if you're a misogynist, and Andrew Tate's more dangerous than Osama bin Laden.
Well, do you know what? We took in almost 1 million people from abroad last year. Whichever government's in power, we cannot go on doing that because public services just simply won't cope. So we have to reform this system. This government's in power now. They've got to find a way of reforming it.
Yeah, but I mean, you guys were in charge for 14 years, and, you know, some might say that the Tories were actually responsible for admitting more migrants than anybody else. When Boris Johnson got in 2019 with his 80-seat majority, there was only 20,000 people coming into this country in illegal migration. It's now over 100,000.
So, Mike, I chose my words carefully there. I said whichever government is in power.
I understand that.
And I fully admit, you know, we were just as much responsible for this as this present government are. But one way or another, this government is now in power. It has to sort it out for the benefit of the country. Otherwise, we're going to be in deep trouble with all our public services.
Well, so how do we sort it out then? What would you do? Tell me. Give me 5 points of how you would sort this out.
Well, the first thing I wouldn't have done is cancel the Rwanda scheme, because the Rwanda scheme, we know, had begun to act as a deterrent. We know that because people went from Northern Ireland to Southern Ireland.
It's a bit of a reach, though, isn't it, Geoffrey? It's a bit of a reach. Tell me 5 things you would do as opposed to things you didn't do.
Well, I'd restore the Rwanda scheme. I'd radically reform the Home Office so they could process people much quicker. I would make sure that they could integrate into our economy with the proper paperwork, with proper controls. And above all, I'd tighten up on the number of legal routes into this country, because that's where the bulk of that million people came from. And I'd make sure that we started to make our own people trained up to do some of these low-paid jobs rather than people coming from abroad and taking those jobs.
Don't you think we need to start mass deportation like they're doing in America?
Well, what we do need to do is actually rapidly send those people who are not entitled to be here. They're not asylum seekers, they're just economic migrants trying to come here to better their way of life. Those are the people that do need to be sent back quicker. And I tell you, there's another category that need to be sent back quicker, and that's those who commit crimes in this country. They should be sent back straight away.
They're showing us how to do it in America, right? They've got a plane, they put them on the plane, they shackle them, and they sit there, and then they fly them back to the country they came from. Why can't we do that?
Well, that's exactly what we were trying to do with Rwanda. Send them to Rwanda.
Because that's the third country. What Donald Trump is doing is saying to Colombia, you've got a bunch of people here from Colombia, they're all migrants, and they're all illegal, and they're all criminals, and we're sending them back to you. And Colombia tried to stop it, and in the end they gave in and they were like, okay, we'll take them. So we should take all of those people from Afghanistan, from Iran, from Iraq, wherever it is they're coming from, committing crimes in this country, having been spent time in prison. Surely we should just be able to put them on a plane, send them back.
And that's exactly what we had started to do. With Albania, for example, we got it down to 90% of the people who came here were returned. And we needed to do much more of that.
Yeah, but that's the only country we've done it with.
It is, and we should do much more with it. We should have many more agreements with countries that they do take their people back quickly.
Yeah, but Trump didn't have an agreement with Colombia, Geoffrey. That's my point. He just put them on a plane.
I know
and when Colombia said, we're not taking them, he went, OK, well, in that case, we're going to put 25% tariffs on everything you do. Any Colombian national that comes into the US of A is going to be searched, is going to be, given a very hard time at the border, and we will also cancel all expenditure that we would ever give you. That's the kind of hardline stuff that we need to see from this government, isn't it?
Well, I do think we need to process them quicker, and we do need to send them back quicker. And I agree with you that if they're not entitled to be here, they should go back.
And how much sort of opposition do you find that would you get in? I'm not having to go at you here, Sir Geoffrey. I don't want you to think that I'm giving you, the old, laser treatment that I gave to Lord Carlisle. It was a complete plank. He was on here the other day. I'm in sympathy with you, but what I want to say to you is how easy is that, or how hard is that to push through? Because no doubt you will encounter all manner of lefties, liberals, weak wastrels who don't want to send anybody back because diversity is our strength.
Well, do you know what? We want this government to succeed in this issue because we cannot go on as we are. Now, I came on your programme to talk about our report about this dreadful asylum purchase that one of a series that we talk about the ineptitude of the Home Office. It's one of the series that a Home Office has embarked upon. As you said in your opening remarks, costing almost £100 million of wasted money because they turn out not to be successful. This one that we've just reported on, North Eye in Sussex, is probably one of the most egregious because they purchased it for 15.4 million when only a year before the previous purchaser had purchased it for around 6 million.
Yeah, well, we broke this story because I happen to know a guy very personally because I happen to go down to that part of the world every single weekend to see my children, even though they don't want me to see them. I've actually visited the site. It's an old army prison camp, which was later used as a training facility by, I think it was Emirates Airlines. And it's at the end of a very nice little kind of, cul-de-sac of very lovely houses with children's toys in the front gardens and trampolines and all of that. And they wanted to put, up to, I think, 1,000 young men in it.
1,400.
Yeah, who wouldn't have been in any way supervised, who wouldn't have been in any way contained, who would have been wandering about, doing all manner of terrible things, no doubt, to the children of the area. And so North Eye is a place. But the amount of money that they've wasted on that, and they've now decided to give up on it altogether, is extraordinary.
It is absolutely extraordinary, and that's what our report was so critical. You know what? They evaded all the normal safeguards for spending government money. They didn't even get a proper valuation, so they didn't know whether they were paying the right price for it or not. It's heavily contaminated. You've been there, Mike. I haven't.
Yeah.
But it's heavily contaminated, both in the soil and asbestos in the building.
That's right.
So even if the purchase went through, they've still got another stash of money to spend on it to get it into a state for anybody to be there.
Exactly.
So this is a really bad episode.
And I would have been in favour of using it, say, as a holding facility if it was going to be some kind of secure unit where you lock people up and say, this is where you're going to stay as a detention centre while we decide how long it's going to be before we kick you out of the country. But it wasn't going to be that. It was going to be literally a sort of a bedroom community for these characters.
Well, that's right. And this is one of a series of these that the Home Office embarked upon. As I say, we want to make sure that the Home Office learns the lessons and they're not going to do this again.
But let's ask a question, right? And maybe you can go away and answer it if you don't know the answer to it now. Who in the Home Office is the impediment to all of this? Because I would like to go into the Home Office with what would only be described as a sort of vacuum cleaner and clean up all of the wokeists, all of the people who hate this country, all of the people who seem to want themselves to be part of some Muslim network so that they can all say, oh, no problem at all here, come in from Afghanistan, come in from Somalia, here's a nice bowl of oats for you if you've come in from Libya. We need to get rid of these people, we need to fire them all and get people running the Home Office who actually support Britain and who want to protect our own country.
No, well, it's the government of the day, and we were that government. This government is now this government who has to give the instructions to the civil service. They should then carry it out.
Yeah, but they don't want to carry out the instructions because they're all infested with this woke virus, where they think that, diversity is our strength and, people like you are fascists, people like me are horrible bigots and racists and we don't like people with brown skin. Absolute rubbish, right? It's not about what colour their skin is. It's about the fact that we are not, as Kemi Badenoch has said recently, a hotel. We are not a country that should be just putting up with everybody who wants to come and live here on the free.
So, I start from the premise that we cannot go on taking the number of people into this country that we did in the last year or so. 1 million people. Imagine that. That's 10 million people over 10 years.
Yeah.
We just cannot do it.
No.
So, whatever government's in power, they've got to get... And we did start, to be fair, but too late, far too late. We did start with our returns policy, the law we passed, that if they came here illegally, they would never be entitled to settle here.
Yeah.
What happens at the moment, if they come in on the boats and manage to disappear for long enough, they can then get papers to stay here. Now, we were going to put a stop to all of that. People should come here. They should either be entitled to stay here because they're proper asylum seekers, or they should be sent home, as you said earlier. Right. And that's really what we failed to do.
I would take a hose to the Home Office and send some of them home, to be honest. Thank you very much to Geoffrey Clifton Brown, very sensible man. If only people would do what you want. Sir Geoffrey. 03444991000, Chair of the Public Accounts Committee, Conservative for North Cotswolds. Bit of breaking news for you. 15-year-old boy has been charged with the murder of Harvey Wilgoose, 15 years of age, who was stabbed to death at a school in Sheffield just a couple of days ago. Because the 15-year-old who's been charged is underage, he cannot be identified. There's no mystery as to why that's not happening. It just happens to be the law. Coming up, we're going to talk to Howard Cox. He's here to talk about fuel prices going up once again. But also, I'd like to say this. This is a great one from Julie in Notts. Just love waking up to your show, Mike. The Swedish word for plank is, guess what? Planker. There we are. This is Talk.
Those who were polled want the police to be tough on murder, no surprise there, serious crime, sexual assaults, rape, that kind of thing. They're with us, they're with you, they're with me, they're with every other right-minded thinking person. Can the police do some proper policing? Now, some of those crimes the police do rather well. Murders, albeit the unsolved murder rate is creeping up. Let me make you aware of that. But they don't want online insults.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I am Mike Graham. It is coming up to 5 minutes to 8. This one from somebody who doesn't give a name. Pointless having Kemi Badenoch take Starmer to task when his response will be to point at the previous government and their behaviour. Nothing but whataboutery from him. It's his only defence. Absolutely right. Well, let's talk to Howard Cox, a good friend of the show, founder of Fair Fuel UK, of course, because there's some changes coming. If you thought you were going to get away with having an electric car that wasn't going to cost you any money, well, guess what? We've got some bad news for you. Because the state, of course, has found a way of charging you more money. And also, fuel prices are getting bigger and higher, even as we speak. Howard, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Good to talk to you, man. Car hikes are coming in April. 75% of Britons apparently unaware. I mean, I've been saying for a long time, warning people that, you know, if you thought you were doing your good old virtue signalling, driving an electric car nonsense, that's all over. They're going to come for you. They're going to charge you loads of money, just as they would if you were driving a petrol car. And also, fuel prices back up again. What's going on?
Well, there's a lot of things. I mean, obviously, EV drivers, and the smug ones particularly, are going to be in for a big shock. They're not aware about it. And I know for a fact that the Treasury also looking at actually changing the whole tax way VED is actually calculated based on the weight of a vehicle. So, you know, and we all know electric vehicles are much heavier than...
They weigh a lot more, don't they? I mean, I don't know that you'll know better than me, but I mean, they weigh about twice as much as a regular car, don't they?
Yeah, it varies. I mean, on average, you're about 30 to 40% more, that sort of level. But as far as petrol prices, here we go again. 15 years I've been doing this, Mike, as you know.
But you've actually been very successful at lobbying the government and keeping the fuel tax relatively low over time.
Well, we stopped it going up, and in fact, it went down by 10%. And we didn't believe, did we, that Rachel from Accounts would keep it frozen in the budget. We were shocked by that. Instead, she went for the farmers, not the motorists. So, but what really is worrying about this is that why is Northern Ireland, right, part of the UK, 8p cheaper for diesel and 5p cheaper for petrol? They come from the same refineries, the same places, only 6 or 7 refineries in the whole of the country. So why is we, particularly in the southeast, being hit by these higher petrol prices? And, you know, I worked with Claire Coutinho at the beginning of last year. We launched a thing called Pump Watch, as you remember.
Yes.
And Pump Watch was meant to actually show pump prices being more transparent and fairer. But it's not working. And you'd think a Labour government would be helping the working person and the small business in terms of keeping their costs down. But no, Pump Watch is still not working whatsoever.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, they keep saying they're not going to put more taxes on working people, but there's nothing like a tax on fuel that will affect very, very seriously every working person in this country.
And also the whole of the economy, mate. The whole thing in terms of inflation, everything happens. You know, when you talk about inflation, your next sentence will be, well, pump prices went up or they went down, depending. It's the indicator in terms of the impact of inflation is so acute. But, you know, here we go again. The sort of thing, supermarkets are going up faster than, sorry, not as fast as ordinary ones. And, of course, motorway service stations are going up even faster.
And what about... Sorry, I was going to say, what about the electric car kind of tax that they're going to bring in? Because for a long time people said, oh yeah, great, get an electric car because you'll be free of tax, you won't be hit with any road tax, you won't be hit with any levies. That's all changing as well, right?
It is changing, and it's a variable tax. We're looking at probably about £150, that sort of area for most of the average sort of EV vehicle. But, you know, we've got to pay for the repair of potholes and those sorts of things. They use the same roads and they cause more damage than an internal combustion engine. So, you know, they've got to use those roads are there for us all to use, and you should be paying for them, including cyclists.
Yeah. Well, don't worry. Somebody's invented some self-growing bitumen, which is a bit like self-growing concrete, and they're going to repair the roads with that. So, you know, listen, as I said yesterday, I'm obviously so far ahead of my time that it's scary. But Howard, listen, very good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. We've got to run. Howard Cox there, founder of Fair Fuel UK. Chris says this: my grandfather used to say to me, common sense is like deodorant. Those who need it the most don't use it. That last Swedish journalist you had on should use it. I think you're right. And Philip says, is it legally possible for a member of the public to make a claim that a political party lied and deceived them into getting their vote and then did the complete opposite of their pledge when voted in under a false pretence? Well, I think it would be a good move if we could finally find some recommendation or some way of getting back at governments and getting back at politicians who make completely and utterly irregular promises, which then turn out to be not only not possible to do, but actually not even on the framework of what they want to do. I think something has to be done, and I think you and I both would certainly agree with that. Coming up, Dan Hodges from the Mail on Sunday. He's been defending Keir Starmer over the voice coach. This should be fun. This is Talk. I'm Mike Graham. We'll see you after the news.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I
have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 3 minutes past 8. The sun has arisen and it looks rather nice out there, actually. I've said all week that there is definitely a spring in the air. I feel as though, you know, there's a renewal going on. Unfortunately not in Downing Street, unfortunately not in the Labour Party. They're just as bad as they ever were. And Keir Starmer is under even more of a cloud this week than he was before. We're going to talk to Dan Hodges very shortly, commentator from the Mail on Sunday. He's been defending Keir Starmer and his hiring of the voice coach for the December the 24th Jamboree, because that's what I'm calling it. There is no way in any world that you can convince me that she went to see him in London on the 24th of December, taking a picture on the train of nobody else on the train, taking a 50-mile return journey to spend time with Keir Starmer, teaching him how to say, "We must release the sausages," and or possibly other greatest hits of Keir Starmer, where we're fixing the foundations, and what we were doing for working people. I mean, are you telling me, seriously, that he actually had a voice coach, for one, and if he did have one, is that what she was actually teaching him? Maybe she was teaching him something else completely. She turned up wearing a mask. There's a picture of her on the 24th of December in Labour Party headquarters. What was she doing there? Her name, of course, is Leonie Mellinger. She's in the Daily Mail today, Dan Hodges' own paper, the racy past of an actress who gave lessons to Starmer. Somebody's let a picture through, by the way, in the family newspaper that is the Daily Mail, which in no way, shape or form should have been allowed. In my day in newspapers, you wouldn't have allowed a nipple on page 11, but her nipple is clearly there. She's clearly, you know, simulating sex with some bloke in a movie called Memoirs of a Survivor, 1981. She was also married to a bloke called Robin Asquith. Now, call me old-fashioned, you know, but this tells me that she was probably what we used to refer to as a good time girl. She's married to this guy who was involved in Confessions of a Window Cleaner, followed by a series of other confessions movies that he was in, sort of Benny Hill-like, but a lot of women running around topless. And she's also pictured as looking a bit sultry, it would have to be said, by the Daily Mail. And a leading barrister, an expert in COVID legislation, said yesterday it was arguable that Sir Keir Starmer would want a voice coach in person during lockdown. Adam Wagner, who is a guy we've spoken to many times from Doughty Street Chambers, which Sir Keir founded because he was one of the people that set up the old human rights laws and the human rights chambers. And he's asking a question. This is how stupid lawyers are, right? He was asking a question of whether in-person coaching was reasonably necessary for work. Come on, mate. I mean, come on. What do you mean reasonably necessary? The one thing that I was always thinking when I was in lockdown during COVID was after I finished working, when I got home, I thought, shouldn't I order a voice coach to come around and help me out while I'm cooking something for dinner? And always the answer was no, because I didn't need a voice coach, because I can speak perfectly well on my own. And also, if I wanted to smuggle somebody into my apartment for sex, you know, that was something that you did in a different way. Pretend they're delivering a pizza. Pretend they're delivering a pizza. I'm not suggesting that that's what he was doing. Of course not. That would be wrong. Completely wrong. But I'm saying she was probably being brought to Downing Street for a party, wasn't she? Of some way, shape or form. I don't know. Was Robin Asquith there? You know, confessions of a Prime Minister. That's what I want to know. 0344 499 1000. 7 minutes past 8. I can't wait to talk to Dan Hodges. I don't know what he's going to tell me. I don't know how he's going to defend any of this. This is Morning Glory. Listen, there's a lot going on here. I've got this from Gary in Northants. Why doesn't Starmer give the Chagos Islands to the USA if he's so keen on getting rid of them? It's a good idea. Brilliant. Also, Keir Starmer is a disgrace, says Stephen Huddersfield, and the worst hypocrite I can think of. He makes me more depressed every day, unfortunately. The Chagos deal is the worst deal in the history of the UK and proves that Starmer does not have British interests at heart and that he actually hates the British people. Well, not only that, he hates the Chagosian people as well. They don't want him to give them away. That's another story. But let's not talk about that. Let's talk about the old Confessions of a Window Cleaner gate with Dan Hodges. Dan, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I don't know where to begin. I know you've put something out there which is entirely correct and legitimate, which says, you know, it was only guidelines, it wasn't the law. You know, it might be that you had you could go to work in person if you couldn't work from home. But none of it rings true, does it? I mean, the idea that this woman who spent an awful lot of time doing Zoom calls and who actually put out a tweet 3 months after Christmas to say, isn't it great to be back doing coaching in person, suddenly decided she had to do one session in person with the leader of the opposition on Christmas Eve of 2020. I mean, it's not defensible, is it? She's clearly not a key worker. She clearly didn't have to go there and teach him anything on Christmas Eve. She was going there for some eggnog.
Yeah, unfortunately, just on this is one rare occasion where your estimable researchers seem to have got the wrong end of the stick somewhere. I mean,
I don't have any research. I do my own research. I don't blame them.
Defending Keir Starmer on this one. I mean, I think your point is well made. I mean, I don't understand how anybody can think that what she was doing was necessary even within the context of what she work purposes. I mean, it seems ludicrous. The only point where I think somebody might have got the wrong end of the stick was yesterday was the point is...
Well, you put out a tweet yesterday, Dan, which said that the rules said everyone must work from home unless they are unable to do so, which I took to mean that you were justifying the possibility that she might have had to go to work.
No, I mean, the point is that I think the point is, I mean, you quoted Adam yesterday. I mean, I think this came up in the context of a discussion I was having on Twitter with Adam yesterday. Yes. I think, and we've seen this before with the whole COVID saga. I think the problem is there is a difference between the rules, as in what ministers were telling us to do, what all the public information sort of literature was telling us we had to do, and what was actually written into legislation. Right. Now, the rules are crystal clear, which is you shouldn't have been going, I mean, you shouldn't have been travelling. This is the other point in terms of what she did. Shouldn't have been travelling. I think she lived in a tier 3 area.
In Brighton,
She moved into a tier 4 area.
Right.
That was clearly, we were told you shouldn't do that.
Right.
And the rules were very clear that you shouldn't.
I mean, I remember very clearly back in 2020 when all of this started to sort of first kicked off. I didn't even go and see my children who lived in Sussex, right? Not as far away as Brighton, but nearly as far away, because I didn't think that I was supposed to mix households. You know, I live in London, my kids live in Sussex with their mother, and I didn't go and see them for 8 weeks. And one of the reasons I didn't go was that I worried that if I did go, I might get stopped by the police on the M25, who would put some kind of ring around London and say, no, you can't come back.
Well, but I think the key thing in this is, you know, there is the now famous photo of her travelling that she posted of travelling back from the meeting when she's on a train, and there's literally no one else on it. So I think we've got the photo there.
Yeah.
So it's very clear what the rules were at the time. Now, the point, I think Adam was making the point yesterday, and if to an extent he's right, if you look at what the law said at the time, the law did not actually make a reference to key workers. The law basically said you could only travel if it was, I think the wording is, if it was reasonably necessary for work purposes.
Yes,
now,
but they actually made you, because I was made one. I had a card that said I was a key worker, which enabled me to come to work every day, right, in this very building. Because if you didn't have one of those and the police asked you what you were doing, moving and travelling around during those times, you were told to go home. You were told you don't go home, you will be sanctioned in some way.
I mean, this is you know,
wasn't a choice.
No, I mean, look, the point is, the cutting through all this, there is no reason why she should have been travelling up there on that day, right? And, you know, I mean, I've seen reports of this. I'm going to be honest, I haven't yet checked it myself, but there have been reports. She was literally saying she was doing her voice coach work online at that time.
Yes.
And I think it was 6 months after that, she did a big thing saying, "Oh, I'm now back doing in person."
Doing it in person, isn't it great? Yeah, absolutely.
The fact is, whatever the law was in terms of the rules, and certainly the rules, everybody knew it, she broke them. And the key thing is this: it's not just that, you know, she broke them. This was at a time when Keir Starmer was an evangelist for the rule. He was actually attacking Boris Johnson and saying Boris was being reckless by not introducing a proper national lockdown at that time.
Yeah.
And the point is,
let's remind ourselves of what he actually said. We've got the clip from 2022, actually, which is 2 years after this, but let's see what he said.
Doesn't the Prime Minister realise that John would have given the world to hold his dying wife's hand, even if it was just for 9 minutes? But he didn't, because he followed the Prime Minister's rules. Rules that we now know the Prime Minister blithely, repeatedly and deliberately ignored.
I mean, you know, we could find a whole bunch of clips, but, you know, we don't really need to. But that gives you the tenet of what he's been saying.
No, absolutely. And again, it just falls under the sort of banner of things we've talked about before, which is the way Keir Starmer and some of those around Keir Starmer take the public for idiots. You know, we saw the clip of him, you know, quite petulantly
with Jack Elsom, in the Sun. Of course not, he says. You know,
saying, of course the rules were broken. It's quite clear the rules were broken. Now,
so you're saying the rules were broken?
Oh, the rules were clearly broken. The thing I was saying yesterday is people were saying he's broken the law, he has to resign over it. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I'm not entirely sure what the law was at that point, because obviously we saw with Boris, for example, Boris got a fine for the cake, right? He didn't get a fine for the half a dozen other parties that he...
A lot of which he wasn't actually at, to be fair.
Attended. Well, a lot of them he wasn't, but a lot of them he was.
Well, no, lots of them. But I mean, like the ones that were the main kind of, complainants, shall we say, the ones where, there was drunkenness going on and people wheeling, suitcases full of wine back from the Tesco's down at Westminster Station. He wasn't at any of those. And I'm not defending Boris Johnson because it's not what I do. Dan. I mean, they were all at it. They were all like completely being fast and loose with the rules. But at the end of the day, I mean, if you're going to say there's a difference between breaking the rules and breaking the law, fair enough. But that doesn't change anything, in my view, for Keir Starmer, because Keir Starmer, in the end, is a hypocrite.
No, I think the hypocrisy charge is absolutely valid. The point I'm making, though, is, I mean, you can say there were certain parties that Boris didn't attend. There were certain parties Boris did attend, but he didn't get a fine. Equally, I mean, I still don't understand how Keir Starmer got away with the beer and curry, for example. That seemed to me.
I mean, I was going to read this out.
Breach of the law at the time.
Well, I was going to read this out because at the top of your Twitter is still a pinned tweet which says, it's interesting, isn't it, that basically all the staff who were on the Durham trip with Sir Keir Starmer have since left his office. A bit similar to the people who were witnesses to the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah, well, that was kind of a joke, but I mean, no. But the point is, I don't understand how Keir Starmer got away with that. I mean, I think the understanding of everybody watching this programme was you couldn't go out for a beer and a curry.
But this is the point. I mean, I can tell you absolutely categorically there were things that I did in order to kind of, shall we say, get around the rules. I used to go down with my boss. We used to go down to where we used to go to a pub which was closed, and we would buy a couple of cans, right, like a pair of winos, and go and stand behind the pub where the wall was, where nobody could see us, and drink and have a chat, because that was the only way you could do it. But even then, we stood a metre apart. I mean, that's how ridiculous it was.
Right. I think this is the key point. Let's just set all the politics aside for a second. What was Keir Starmer saying at the time? What was Boris saying at the time? We were being told we had to stay at home.
Yeah.
And we were being told we had to stay at home because if we didn't stay at home, people were going to die.
People would die, yeah, totally.
People would die. Vulnerable people would die.
Yeah.
Now, the point is, as we know, at the same time that Keir Starmer was telling us that, and as I said, he was an evangelist for the rules at the time. He was saying, you must not travel. We know it's hard. You mustn't travel. You have to do that to protect our community, protect your neighbours. He was getting his voice coach, travelling up to London and coming into the office.
Right.
Now, that is not defensible.
But
that
also, a woman who had previously taught him to speak, I mean, forget about how ridiculous that even sounds, previously on Zoom, because she didn't need to go and see him. So that's why I think he's being disingenuous here, and he's actually concealing the truth, because he wasn't having a voice coaching lesson. He clearly wanted to see her, and he clearly wanted to have her come and have a drink. It was Christmas Eve. My suspicion is that it was a party, and there may be more people that were invited than we know about, and that may come out in the fullness of time, which will finish him. Because if it turns out they had an actual party, and it wasn't just her that was invited, but there were other people as well, he will have a real problem trying to get out of that one, won't he?
Well, that's quite a big accusation you're making there, Mike. So
it's not an accusation, but all I'm saying to you is, Dan, listen, you and I have been around the block a few times, right? There's only two reasons why you invite that woman to see you on Christmas Eve, and neither of them is about having a voice coaching lesson. Let's face it, right?
As I said, that's your allegation, Mike. It's not where it's not.
Well, all right. Okay, so you believe that the Prime Minister wanted to have an emergency voice coach lesson in person by a woman wearing a mask on Christmas Eve of 2020. You actually believe? If you believe that, you should immediately sack yourself as a journalist, because you can't possibly think that that's true. You can't.
As a journalist, I always have a golden rule, which is I don't make allegations unless I can support them with the evidence. So
I'm not making any allegations. I'm giving you a scenario, right? I'm giving you a scenario which is a lot more believable than the one that we're being told by Downing Street. And if you also think that Downing Street doesn't tell lies about covering things up, then you also need to sack yourself.
No, but again, if Downing Street, I'll accuse Downing Street of lying where I've got evidence of Downing Street lying, and I haven't got any evidence that she was there for any other reason than they said.
So you, Dan Hodges, seriously, a very, very serious commentator for the Mail on Sunday newspaper, think that this woman took a 50-mile round-trip journey from Brighton to give Keir Starmer a lesson in how to say, let's bring home the sausages, or possibly, you know, fixing the foundations? You believe that?
As I said, that's what Downing Street have said.
You're fired. I mean, come on, man.
Fair enough. Well, as you say, I mean, I haven't got any evidence that she was there for a party. So
right. Well, then, the only other explanation is she wasn't there for a party, and she was coming in a personal capacity to spend some personal time with her client.
I mean, again, if you have some evidence of that,
the evidence is that she was there, he was there. Apparently, nobody else was there, according to you, because it wasn't a party. So, what were they doing?
I'm not saying there was nobody else there. I'm saying if there was somebody there, I haven't any evidence that she was there for a party.
Right.
And people
should we not be asking Downing Street these questions? Have you not asked them?
Have I asked Downing Street that she was there for a party? No.
Why not?
Well, because I haven't seen any suggestion she was there. This is
You
literally...
don't need to see a suggestion. Your job is to question the government and say, what was she actually doing there? And if they come back and say she was giving him a voice lesson, then we'll all be able to walk away and go, that's fine. Thank you so much for clearing that up for us. But they haven't said that, have they?
Well, my understanding is they said that she was there because she was his voice coach, and she was there...
Yeah, but that's not the same as saying she was giving him a voice coaching lesson.
As I said, I haven't heard the allegation that she was there for any other purpose, and if she was there for...
Well, you've heard it now, because I've just given it to you.
Well, I have. So, I mean, you know, you're perfectly entitled to phone up Downing Street and put that to them yourself.
Do this. Listen, I'm not having a go at you, Dan. Listen, I just think it's a fascinating situation, and I think Downing Street is squirming like hell, and that's why I'm enjoying it. But listen, good to see you, man. We'll talk to you again soon. Dan Hodges, commentator of the Mail on Sunday. These are simple questions, aren't they? In fact, why don't we ask them? Maybe we could, through the good offices of Talk here, send a couple of written questions to Downing Street. One, was what's her face, Miss Malingerer, in Downing Street giving Keir Starmer a voice coaching lesson? And if she wasn't, what was she giving him, right? And if she was there for a voice coaching lesson, was there anybody else present at the time who could verify that? Because that would obviously clear everything up, and we'd all be able to go home happily and go, do you know what? Keir Starmer obviously has been the great recipient of some voice coaching lessons, because otherwise how would he know how to speak so well publicly? Fixing the foundations. Let's get a voice note from Jay.
Hi, good morning, Mike. Jay here from Stockport. Regarding Keir Starmer, honestly, his arrogance knows no bounds, and watching him like a strutting peacock yesterday, it looks like the Meghan Markle of politics. All the smiles that he was doing and shaking all those lovely hands of those NATO people and all these are my people. Yeah, why don't you come home and shake some of the hands of the people who put you there? Come and shake the hands of the pensioners and the farmers and the people who are struggling trying to keep up with you, and you're useless.
I mean, I can see Jay literally getting herself wound up into a frenzy. Quite right too. Yeah, shake the hands of a few people that you actually have affected. Unfortunately, some of them are dead because of you, because of your policies, because of your complete and utter disregard for their welfare. You complete and utter hypocritical swine. Keir Starmer, I'm calling you out. We're going to put those questions to Downing Street and see what they say. This is Talk.
This is a blatant betrayal of what the people of Britain voted for and what you personally campaigned very hard for, and that was for us to leave. What is he doing there, Alex?
Taking instructions, because that's all he's able to do. The man has no conviction, he has no ideology, he's got extremely zero levels of courage, and so he would much rather be told what to do, even if it's by a failing organisation that seems to make every single mistake that could be made.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 8 to 27. We are here, of course, until 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be along. The sun is blazing, shining across the what can only be described as the skyscape of London here, looking out from the top of the tower at News UK, 17 floors up. It does look rather nice out there, so if you are thinking about going out, I definitely would recommend it. We're going to talk now to Noah Hoffman, political correspondent at The Sun. The Sun's front page this morning is once again a different one to the ones that are on every other paper. They've got an exclusive about a WAG's mega deal. Annie's £750,000 to do Celebrity Big Brother. And this is Annie, of course, Annie Kilner, who's 32 years of age, Carl Walker's wife. Who thinks that she's going to take part in the next Celebrity Big Brother, obviously cashing in on his notoriety. He's just gone to Italy to play football there to try and get away from that other woman who he's had 2 kids with. It's all a bit confusing. But we're all going to talk about this morning the piece on page 10, which is written by Julie Bindell, a very well-known writer of all manner of things, including lots of stuff that she writes about women's rights. But she's talking today about the Nottingham murders. You might remember last year we talked an awful lot about these. Valdo Calocane, who was a schizophrenic, a man who came to this country previously on a visa as a student and then sort of overstayed his welcome, shall we say, who was known as a schizophrenic, a paranoid schizophrenic. He ended up killing 3 people who should never, ever have died. Barnaby Webber, 19 years of age, Grace O'Malley Kumar, 19 years of age, both of them walking home after a party at about 4 o'clock in the morning. Ian Coates, a 65-year-old man as well. A terrible trail of destruction wreaked by this man. Yesterday's story was basically that the NHS did not want to reveal any details about Valdo Calocane because it would be an invasion of his privacy. Today, on the front page of the Times, it basically says that he was described as personable and gentle by mental health workers before he was discharged, despite a history of violence and a refusal to take medication. And Julie Bindell says it's a shocking failing by the system, not only the NHS, but a shocking cover-up as well since. How can data protection come before so many destroyed lives? That's her question. Noah, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. It's a terrible story, this, and with every kind of aspect of it, you just kind of cringe. And, you know, we know we've all been talking about the Southport killer and the prevent problems and the things that stopped us from learning anything about him before he committed his awful crimes. Same goes for this guy, Valdo Calocane, that he would appear to have been known to the system. He was involved and in and out of the NHS and getting treatment for most of his most recent sort of 5 to 10 years while he was living in Britain, and yet nobody thought that he was dangerous. It seems incredible, doesn't it?
It does, and I think, I don't know, did nobody think they were dangerous? I think surely a lot of the mental health practitioners must have known, but to them, that wasn't enough reason to, you know, keep him in check and keep him from going on this mad killing spree. I mean, it is just crazy how much in the past 12 months we have seen example after example of institutional failures and even what some would describe as cover-ups that have really resulted in these really tragic events. Even think about the grooming gangs, for instance. But today we're focusing on Nottingham. And then I think what's so sad, particularly for families of the victims who have been really vocal on the media this morning, doing various interviews, is that there were multiple stages where the state could have seen the red flags, could have intervened more strongly, or could have followed protocols instead of where they failed to. And these three beautiful souls would still be alive to this day. So I think that's what's one of the really tragic parts of this story, is all the missed opportunities to keep this psychopath in check.
Exactly right. And Julie makes the point as well in the piece this morning in The Sun that, it's not just about this case, it's about the kind of the general incapableness, I suppose, for want of a better word, of the establishment in this country, whether it's the health people or whether it's the police or whether it's the judiciary, who seem to be incredibly reticent to let any kind of information out which would be critical of them, but which would also sort of shed light on how these terrible things could have happened. I mean, she says, isn't it absolutely and utterly ridiculous that there is a tendency in this country to want to hide the truth about the lethal mistakes that the system has made? Because surely to God, you are probably too young to have had children at this point. I've got 4 children who are all grown up now. But people listening to this who are mothers and fathers who are sending their kids off to school. We've got that terrible case up in Sheffield of a 15-year-old boy charged with the murder of a stabbing victim, another 15-year-old in a school. There's an awful lot of bad things out there. We surely deserve to be told the truth. We're big enough and ugly enough to be given that information, aren't we?
I mean, it is just beyond comprehension that state institutions are more concerned with preserving their image. And by the way, their image is pretty crap to begin with anyway, so I'm not sure what they're trying to preserve. Then with learning vital lessons that could save lives. And that, again, today is what the family of the victims are going out on the airwaves to say. And they're really honing in on this point that Keir Starmer promised a public inquiry. We've had this report. I mean, it was like pulling teeth to get it out into the public anyway, because the NHS wanted to hide it. We've now had this report, and the next stage is a public inquiry. The Prime Minister had promised it in the past, and what the families of victims are saying today is that it has to go further, because unless lessons are learned, unless rules are changed, unless regulations change, unless protocols change, they will feel like these deaths, were in effect meaningless. They want to see something good come out of this worst situation.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, I had this problem last week or the week before. A bloke called Lord Carlisle came on the show, and the reason we got him on the show was that last September he had said that, Keir Starmer should have released more information about the Southport killer at the moment he was arrested. He at that time agreed with the head of the counter-terrorism police, who also said that. And when he came on my show, he suddenly changed his mind completely and said, no, Keir Starmer's been absolutely right. He's come out and said that this man should not be considered to be a terrorist because he didn't fit the definition, and he was completely right to withhold information, which later led to all those riots that happened in the summer because people had a sort of, a vacuum of ideas and a vacuum of facts, and so they were filled with conspiracy theories and wrongful accusations. And so, I mean, there is a real problem, and I think it's a very serious problem that this country has, that the authorities don't trust the public with knowledge. They think we're all stupid. They think we should all be just, sit there like mushrooms, keep them in the dark and cover them in manure, and they'll be fine. And I think it's time that changed.
Definitely, and it's also just, in a way, it's kind of funny because it backfires every single time. Every single time they try and cover something up, these institutions end up looking worse and worse.
Of course.
If they were just open and honest to begin with, the backlash would honestly be half as large. And we even see this every day as journalists working in Westminster, going into briefings with the Prime Minister's spokesman. We see them try and sort of worm their way around tough questions rather than going with a direct answer, something that, quite frankly, we see from Donald Trump, and that's done well for him. It just never, ever works. Every time they try and dodge and skirt around things, it ends up getting worse for them. And you just have to wonder how many more tragic incidents it will take until they think, okay, maybe it's time to change now.
Yeah, absolutely right. No, just because you are in that Westminster situation, I just want to ask you a quick question about Keir Starmer today. This business of the voice coach is really turning into a much bigger story, obviously, than Downing Street would like it to be. Are you expecting that to become a big issue today at Prime Minister's Questions?
It could potentially be raised. I think there are other topics that are possibly going to be higher on the agenda. I think MPs will be keen to hear the Prime Minister's response to the Chagos surrender proposal, pledging £18 billion of taxpayer cash to surrender an island to an ally of China. There'll probably be a response to Trump's latest comments about taking over Gaza as well, and also from Rachel Reeves that we could be in for more tax rises in the spring. So there's so many options, which is always makes for a great PMQs. It might come up, but I think there are possibly some other issues that could come up first. OK, well, we shall watch it with some interest. Great to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed. Noah Hoffman there, political correspondent at The Sun. The piece in the Mail, in The Sun today by Julie Bindell. Shocking NHS failings and a shocking NHS cover-up. How can data protection come before so many destroyed lives? She's talking about the situation in Nottingham with Valdo Callacane. She says, what is it about the state and its shocking tendency to want to hide the truth about its lethal mistakes? It's a massive problem, and I'm going to fight tooth and nail to get the law changed on not just the Nottingham situation, but all sorts of situations where the government thinks, oh, we better not tell them that. You know, let's not tell them that the Southport killer was the son of some Rwandan immigrants, because it might not be very healthy for them, because they might end up rioting. Oh, really? Well, they ended up rioting anyway. You complete planks. Let's get a voice note from Carl on crime in Sweden.
How you doing, Mike? Carl from Hertfordshire. I'm just watching this guy you got on from Sweden. I've been looking into Sweden in the last few months, and good God, mate, the country's gone. For a population the size of sort of London, the amount of crime, and I can't put my finger on it. Why? What could it be?
I wonder, Carl, whether it might be the influx of an awful lot of illegal migrants. It's the thing that nobody wants to speak about. They don't want to talk about it. But actually in Sweden, they've taken some big steps towards kicking some of these people out, because they've said themselves that this country is somehow being overrun by illegal migrants. We heard that plank that we had on, planker, as they say in Sweden, who basically said, you know, oh, yeah, we've got a right-wing Prime Minister, that's the problem. No, it's not. The problem is some bloke who went berserk with a gun and shot 11 people dead, including himself. You know, I'm sorry. It's very obvious what's gone wrong with some of these European countries, and it's Angela Merkel's fault. If you want to go all the way back to tracing it to Germany, when she issued the dictum to people from Syria to say, listen, if you are running away from war, if you want a place of safety, if you want a place of salvation, a sanctuary, come to Germany. And of course 1 million people came, all of whom said they were Syrian, most of whom were not. But everyone went, oh, are you Syrian? Yeah, definitely. Are you? OK then, in you come. Unbelievable. Donald Trump, big in the news today. He basically wants to take over Gaza and turn it into a casino, which is no bad thing in my view. I think it's a great idea. Here's what he had to say when he found out that Joe Biden, his predecessor, sleepy, creepy Beijing Joe Biden, has apparently signed himself up with a talent agency, right?
What do you think about Joe Biden signing on with a talent agency?
You gotta be kidding. He signed on with a talent agency?
He does. He's got some entertainment agents now.
I think he's got bigger problems than that. I really do. I think he's got much bigger problems than that, but I wish him well. We inherited a mess. This place is a mess, but it's quickly being solved, the problem. We're going to make America great again. Thank you very much. All right,
I wish him well. Can you imagine if he turned up to do The Apprentice and Donald Trump was going, you're fired? Joe Biden talent agency. You know, sorry, doesn't compute. How about this? Why does a top KC, King's Counsel, like Keir Starmer, need a voice coach? Arguing cases in front of a judge and jury in a courtroom is his bread and butter. I don't think it is. See, people say, there's a lot of myths around about Keir Starmer. Oh, he was this brilliant lawyer. Was he? No. If you're a brilliant lawyer, right, you stay in private practice, you become very wealthy, you represent everything from companies to individuals to, you know, very, very rich people who can go to the law to get all sorts of remedies. And what you don't do is go into the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, which doesn't pay any money at all, and which is a kind of pointless exercise. So I don't agree that Keir Starmer is a brilliant judge of character, or brilliant lawyer. He just isn't. And Barry says, good morning, Mike. Barry from Suffolk here. Voice coach, simple verification would be, was she paid for the lesson, check the financial records, or asked to see the receipts? Good question. Let's do that. Let's put that one to Downing Street as well. Can Keir Starmer supply the receipt that he got from the said voice coach, Confessions of a Window Cleaner wife, topless in the Daily Mail today? Did he get a receipt for that? Whatever it was that she did for him. And if so, did he put it through his accounts, as you would normally do? Did he claim back the VAT? And how long was the session? Half an hour? 20 minutes? 15 minutes? I don't know. I don't know how much voice coaches cost. I've never had one. Was it an hour? I'm sorry. I can't take any of this seriously anymore. What's the time? 8:41.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:44. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. The sun is shining. It's a reasonably good day. We're waiting to hear what's going on in the Chagos Islands, apart from anything else. Prime Minister's questions coming up today at midday, of course. It may well be that Kemi Baden will ask a question about Chagos, because it turns out that, according to the Telegraph this morning, Chagos is now not only being given away to Mauritius, even though supposedly the Chagosians don't want it to happen, but we're not just paying them £9 billion. We're now going to pay them double that, £18 billion. We got Con Coughlin here with us, Defence and Foreign Affairs editor and an expert in so many matters of diplomacy around the world over the years. Con, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I've likened this to me kind of giving somebody a second-hand car and saying, look, I've got this car, I'd like to give it to you. Normally speaking, I'd expect you to pay me for it, but in fact, under these circumstances, I'm going to pay you to take it off my hands, and I'm going to pay you such a ridiculous amount of money over the course of the next 10 years that you're going to be very happy. It makes no sense, does it?
No, and of course, the other thing about this is the security aspect, because what we've got at the heart of this deal is one of the most important military bases the Western Alliance has, Diego Garcia.
Right.
And this is a really important base, particularly for the US. We use it as well. And from here, we have we've carried out all our operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, etc. And by giving this whole territory over to Mauritius, which is friendly to China and other countries like Iran, we are jeopardizing our own security. So apart from the whole issue of taking away my second-hand car and giving you lots of money for the privilege, we are also doing ourselves an act of enormous self-harm. And the other thing, Mike, I would say is that, this deal is completely at odds with what's going on in Washington with the Trump administration. I mean, it is quite clear that Trump sees China as a threat, and you only have to look at what they're saying about the Panama Canal and Chinese influence there and the threat to American security. I cannot see the Americans signing this deal off.
No.
So here's the government bending over backwards to hand over this territory, give them money, everything else, at a time when they're going completely against the grain of what the Western alliance actually requires.
Yeah, right. And were we not led to believe that, there were two things at the heart of all of this? That one, when the negotiations started, the British government wanted to get it all out of the way before the American election took place. They then kind of took, I suppose, stock of the fact that it looked as though Trump might actually win because Kamala Harris was so useless that she couldn't possibly win. They then thought, maybe we'll just wait until, if Trump gets in, we'll have another conversation. And then there seemed to be a suggestion that they might have sort of handed over control of the negotiations to the US. And then it seemed as though they might sort of row back on it. But they seem to have now reversed once again and are now trying to push it through almost as though Trump won't notice.
Yeah, but this is a classic case of this government being led by lawyers, not leaders. Because if the government had an ounce of political nous, it would see the national security implications involved in this deal. It would also look at how potentially damaging this is going to be for relations with Washington. But instead, and the origins of this, let's not forget, is there was a judgment. It wasn't a ruling. There was a judgment by an international court that Mauritius might have a claim. That's all it was. But because Starmer and all his lefty lawyers are so obsessed with following legal judgments, they've done this deal to pursue the legal niceties, not the national interest. And it's just yet another example of how useless this government is.
Well, exactly right. And they're taking their lead from this International Criminal Court, which is so biased in all of its dealings that they've even suggested that Benjamin Netanyahu should be arrested if he enters Britain. David Lammy, of course, our Foreign Secretary, has said, yes, we believe that if Benjamin Netanyahu comes to Britain, we will enable his arrest thanks to the International Criminal Court. But they've sort of... Again, it's Keir Starmer, isn't it? He's the worst kind of lawyer who seems to be only interested and only motivated by what he regards as legal frameworks. So if he is given a piece of paper that doesn't have anything to do with the law, doesn't know what to do with it. But if somebody says, oh, don't worry, there's been a judgment passed by this International Criminal Court, or, here's some legal framework that explains how you can give away the Chagos Islands, he's happy to do it. But, I mean, almost everyone, apart from him and Lammy, are going, this is a bad deal for Britain. What are you doing? And the Chagosians don't want it either.
Yeah, well, as I say, I cannot see how the Trump administration is going to sign off on this deal.
Can they actively block it then, do you think?
I think if they don't want it to go ahead, it would be very difficult for Britain, given how intertwined our intelligence and military alliance is, for us to ignore those concerns. So I think Starmer and co are going to be saved from themselves by the Americans, but it's a very unhappy position to be in, and we shouldn't have gotten this position before. And when David Cameron was Foreign Secretary, one of the few good things he did, in my view, was to look at this deal and say, actually, this is not in our national interest. And I think, as I said, if this government had an ounce of political nous, they would see the damage they're doing to our future national security considerations and wouldn't go near this deal. And if they wanted to get lawyered up, then they should go back to these international courts and make the argument to justify our continued use and our sovereignty over this territory. That's the way to go.
Yeah, but that's the trouble again, because they appear to have no sort of intellectual nous as a government. They don't seem to have any diplomatic skills whatsoever. They sent old Jonathan Pole down there to do the negotiation for them, who's an ex-Blairite character. And they seem to be absolutely chock full of the idea that this is a priority for them, because if you think about all the things that they've done, some of which have backfired on them, this is hardly something that anyone in the electorate, certainly anyone sitting in Sutton Coldfield or sitting in Glasgow or Bradford or anywhere, everybody's not going, oh, we must sell off the Chagos Islands, that's one of the major things that we must do. Nobody wants it to happen.
Yeah, well, that's the problem with this government. And you mentioned Jonathan Powell, and of course it is a reflection of the paucity of talent in this Labour government, that they're having to dig up all these old Blairites like Jonathan Powell, Peter Mandelson, George Robertson's doing the Defence Review, Adam Milburn's doing the Health Review, and it just shows you just how incompetent this government is. Yeah. That they're having to fall back on people whose sell-by date was 20 years ago.
Right. Exactly right. Just while I've got you, Con, I mean, what's your take 2 weeks into the Donald Trump regime? I mean, he seems to be, cracking the whip. He seems to be getting an awful lot of things done domestically. We already know that he's managed to get some hostages released in Israel. He's made noises about sorting out the whole situation in Russia with Putin invading Ukraine and all of that. What's your sort of take on how he's doing?
Well, he's certainly making waves. I mean, the thing about Trump is you can't ignore him. There are lots of things about Trump when he was last president that I applauded, such as getting NATO to sort of wake up to the threats and start paying for their defence. And he's done some good things there. I think that the tariff argument is a dangerous one because, he's actually picking on allies. Yeah. And, given the threats we've got from Russia and China, etc., the Western alliance needs to show unity and resolve. And I think this whole tariff war could undermine that. And I think Beijing and Moscow will be looking at Trump and Europe, for example, and the threat of tariffs with the EU, and saying, well, the whole Western alliance is crumbling. We will continue to be aggressive. So I think there are challenges and there are risks, but he's certainly woken everybody up.
There's no question. And also his kind of what you might call bull in a china shop diplomacy appears to be working. I mean, it certainly worked in Colombia, certainly worked in Mexico. The tariffs that he threatened appear to have got them to move on finding ways to put more troops on the border to stop people illegally entering the country. I'm told that, their illegal migration stats are down 95% since he got in. So, maybe he can teach us a thing or two.
Well, I think there are lots of people around the world, including here in the UK, who make the point that Trump has done more in a couple of weeks than most governments have done in a decade.
Yeah, totally.
And I think the fact that you can have somebody who comes in to power and immediately implements the manifesto he promised is something that people feel very sort of rewarding and uplifting. And I think there's a lesson here for people that. If you tell the electorate when you get to power you're going to do something, then do it. Yeah. And not.
People might actually like you for it as a politician.
They might do. I mean, in my experience, covering this beat for 40-odd years, people like strong leaders. Absolutely. They like Thatcher. Yeah. They even like Tony Blair in his own way, because he had an agenda and he pursued it. And people look back at the Blair era with fondness. I cut my teeth with Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, me too. Well, I said that. I wrote a piece for the Telegraph just a couple of weeks ago saying, you remember the phrase, well, it's morning in America. And it feels like that, doesn't it? The whited sepulchre on the hill, in the shining sepulchre on the hill, I think Reagan talks about as America. And that's how America feels again.
Yeah, golden age. But, I mean, there's a long way to go, Mike. And we'll have to see just how for example, the tariffs work in reviving America's economic fortunes. And the other thing that concerns me is Trump's made it quite clear he hates the idea of any form of military conflict. Well, sometimes you don't have an option. Yeah. And certainly if America wants to take over the Gaza Strip, I think they're going to find some stiff resistance. And as somebody who cut my teeth in Beirut in the 1980s when Americans were all being blown up by Hezbollah, you know, if America starts wandering into the Middle East again, they could get a very bloody nose indeed.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Fascinating stuff. Con, well, listen, we'll take the journey together, I'm sure. We'll be talking about it for the next 4 years of Donald Trump's presidency. Thank you very much indeed. Con Coughlin, Defence and Foreign Affairs Editor at The Telegraph, a man that's seen a few presidents come and go and a few prime ministers come and go as well. Let's get a voice note. No, let's not get a voice note. How about this from Jimmy in Wales? I'm a real practising barrister, he says. 2 points. First, Starmer is an eminent barrister, and to think he needs voice coaching is utterly ludicrous. True. Second, there is case law on governments not being true to their manifestos. There is no legal way to get rid of them except at the next election. Well, you see, Jimmy, that's why you're a barrister and I'm a commentator and a journalist, because, in fact, there are many ways of getting rid of governments, some of which are not always legal, some of which are not always obvious. And you don't have to rely on the law to work out how to get rid of some people, sometimes. And that's all I'll say. This is Talk.
He does speak my language, and looking at the opinion polls, it's not just that one. He's been at the top of several opinion polls over the past few weeks. They've won a few local government by-elections themselves, and that's coming from a stop-start. These were seats that they never stood in before. And I also will say this too, Jeremy, is that we do not have the luxury of several months before the Conservative Party come forward.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up in the next hour, William Clouston joins us from the Social Democratic Party. He'll tell us what he makes of the whole brouhaha over the sacking of the... not the sacking, the whole existence of the voice coach. This from Russ. In regards to the voice coach, it comes back to the great British value of fairness. So many people lost family and friends and could not see them because they followed the rules. Starmer preached about fairness and then blatantly ignored this, even if the rules or the law was followed, says Russell in Leeds. Absolutely right. The Speaker should make the Prime Minister answer questions, otherwise he is a waste of time, says Alan in Merseyside. Well, we're going to put those questions to Downing Street that I put to Dan Hodges, and I'm going to say, you know, we need answers. We need the leader of this country, supposedly, to come clean and to put his hands up and go, you know, either I did something or I didn't do something. We need to know, don't we? Surely it's our right. We pay his wages, we pay his expenses. This is Morning Glory. We'll be back after the news.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspects in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No. There's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 4 minutes past 9, and I am here, of course, until 10 o'clock. 4 glorious hours we do every single weekday morning from 6 until 10. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here just before 10 o'clock to tell us what's coming up on her show. Prime Minister's questions, of course, today. And the big question for me will be, will Kemi Badenoch actually get it right this week and ask questions about the voice coach? Will she actually go down that route and say to him, regardless of what you might want to say about Boris Johnson, regardless of what you might want to say about Rishi Sunak, both of whom got, of course, penalty notices for having some birthday cake in Downing Street back in the days, remember that, You know, this guy is just as guilty as everybody else. He's making out that he had a voice coach come and teach him on Christmas Eve 2020 when Tier 4 rules were in place. And I don't defend Tier 4 rules. Yesterday, I had a Conservative MP thank me for the strength that I had during the COVID rules and the COVID years of actually saying, look, this is all a crock of nonsense. We need to make sure that we get the economy back running properly. We need to make sure that we don't just do what the government tells us. You know, we should use our own discretion. That would be more sensible. All of that stuff, right? All of that. None of that has changed. And so I'm not saying that, you know, these rules were actually were any good or that they were proper, but I do remember that at Christmas 2020 there were plenty of people who didn't see their parents, plenty of people that didn't see their families, plenty of people, I was among them, who couldn't travel. I couldn't go over to see my mother because he brought in these Tier 4 rules. Julie Hartley-Brewer said yesterday that she was actually in the air on her way to a holiday in the Caribbean when they brought them in, so you could go before that but you couldn't go after that. So the idea that this woman, whoever she is, an actress, could travel all the way from Brighton on an empty train to go and see Keir Starmer wearing a mask to teach him how to speak, give me a small break. I mean, if you believe that, I've got some swampland in China to sell you, or even Florida, where there is actually some proper swampland. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Let's get a voice note from Brian.
Morning, Mike, from the South End. Oh, Starmer's got himself in a bit of a pickle, I think, don't you think? Hey? Be interested to see what goes on, and I'm glad Robin Asquith is going to get a few more quid now as a new film, The Confessions of a Prime Minister.
Exactly right. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up, right? Only Keir Starmer would manage to have a voice coach. He was married to Robin Asquith, who, if you're old enough to remember, was in a whole series of soft porn films in the 1970s, including one that was entitled Confessions of a Window Cleaner. Guess what? He used to go up and clean windows and sometimes look inside the room, and there was a woman hardly wearing any clothes. It's not exactly Oscar-winning stuff, you know. We're not talking Yellowstone here. This is not particularly great drama, I have to tell you. But there's a picture of her topless in the Daily Mail today, because she herself was an actress as well, and she obviously took part in a few risque scenarios as well. I don't hold that against her. Why would I? I'm a very modern, liberal man. But it just raises a few questions, doesn't it? 0344 499 1000. William Plouston's here from the Social Democratic Party. We're going to talk to him about what he makes of all of this hypocrisy from Labour. We'll talk about the Chagos Islands some more as well. And also, what is going on with Rachel Reeves? You know, every time she pops up, you know, the pound crashes. Every time she says anything, the stock market goes completely south. I mean, is there any point to her? Really? Honestly? This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. I don't know. I mean, I've been here for 3 hours today and it just doesn't get any better. No. William Plouston, very good morning to you. Welcome.
Good morning.
I alone sort of spotted this story at the weekend and went with it, right? And we're now on day 3. A lot of other people thought it wasn't a story. They've all now realised actually it's quite a big deal, because it's not about whether or not rules were broken or the law was broken. It's about the hypocrisy of a man who spent most of his time during COVID ordering more lockdowns, harder lockdowns, shut the schools for longer, don't reopen them. You know, the rules are the rules. We all know what we're supposed to do. If I broke the rules, I would resign. And here we are. I'm not buying any part of this ridiculous story of his, that he invited this woman to come and see him, to teach him how to speak on Christmas Eve 2020. Seriously?
It's pathetic. Actually, as soon as I heard about this story, it just brought me back to Durham City. Yeah. Where you can have a drink of beer and you can have a curry and get together with your mates. It's not a party, Mike.
No, no.
Not a party.
No, it's all about working late.
No, it's all working late. So, you know, he's done this before, he has form on it. And it is hypocrisy, Mike, because he would they played as hard as they possibly could against Johnson and Johnson's crowd. I think with
probably
some
with good reason.
Yeah,
I'm not defending the Tories here either.
Not at all. And as you know, we both at length fought against ridiculous lockdowns, which have cost us, and all the evidence is in there. It's cost us. But no, this is typical, absolutely typical Starmer. There is a sort of comical side. Again, when I heard about the voice coach, I thought, well, you know, has Starmer got a refund? Has he been paid? I mean, what difference has it made?
This is the ludicrous thing, isn't it? I mean, of all the people that he smuggled into Downing Street, you know, it could have been, you know, somebody to help him with his Pilates. It could have been somebody who was bringing him some secret champagne that he got hold of from somewhere. But no, it's a voice coach for a man who can't speak.
I know, and then well, it's made no discernible difference as I can see. So, but also, and then the Labour Party are looking into the, you know, going around the houses on is a speech coach a key worker?
Yeah.
Well, obviously not. So they've conceded that. Definitely not. And then you're in Tier 4 at the time.
Yeah.
So it's a question of whether you can work from home. I would say this isn't essential on Christmas Eve at all. What the hell does he... What's going on?
There's no way that it's essential.
No.
I mean, it's a bit like saying, I had to have somebody come and do my hair. You know, I know people who, during these particular difficult times, had to smuggle a hairdresser into their own home in order to get their hair done. And you know what women are like, right? They need to get their hair done. They don't like walking around with bad hair. And so I know plenty of people who have confessed to me that they actually had a secret liaison, smuggled somebody into their house to cut the hair.
I don't think we'll get a resolution on whether it was essential. I mean, obviously it's not an essential worker, but I don't think you will get a win on this in terms of was it absolutely necessary. He's going to say it was part of his professional thing and he needed to see it. And I sort of take the point that you can. It must be difficult to coach people not in front of you. Not I mean, people do it.
But she did everything else aside from that particular moment on Christmas Eve. She did everything else with him on Zoom.
I know, but I think it takes the mickey, Mike, because it's clearly not essential at all for this man to get to. It's rubbish.
There's no way.
And he must think people are idiots to believe that. So, but it is the hypocrisy. That's what'll do him in the end.
And the arrogance.
Total
for
arrogance,
him to say,
bossiness.
as he did to Jack Elson from The Sun, when he was asked, you know, did you breach COVID rules? Of course not.
Yeah.
Very tetchy, very grumpy. Well, it's not for you to say, actually. He's a lawyer. He should understand that, you know, judgments are made about the law, not by people themselves, but by judges.
No, I don't often sort of bring close family members into it, but, you know, a close family member couldn't attend a funeral of her mother in this time. Right. And they were arguing for harder lockdown.
Of course.
Stinks.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely right. Let's move on and talk about the Chagos Islands, because this morning we learned that not only are we still absolutely ramped behind the idea of selling them off, but we're not making any money. I'll use the same analogy. I said this earlier. It's a bit like me offering you a second-hand car and saying, look, it's a really good car. I know you don't really want it, don't really need it. So in order to sort of, you know, convince you to take it off me, I'm going to pay you 20,000 quid a month for the rest of time, so that you can drive around in it.
Complete absurdity.
It's ridiculous.
Just refresh the listeners on this. So this is a territory which Britain has had sovereignty and possession of for over 200 years.
Yeah.
Mauritius didn't even exist. It wasn't even an entity, a legal entity. So we've had this thing uninterrupted. The question of sovereignty, in my view, is not in question. Not in question. I don't buy that sovereignty has to be contiguous with your own land to have it. That's not true. There are lots of bits and pieces, particularly French and British assets all over the world that were from empire which still exist, and no one questions the sovereignty. So why on earth they suddenly flipped after the ICJ suddenly said, well, there's an advisory thing. And remember, this judgment which Starmer has reacted to and jumped on was not binding. Have you seen the judges on the ICJ? Have you seen the countries they come from?
I know.
No.
Well, the ICJ is a joke, right?
It's a joke.
I mean, we might as well call it the International Court of Jokers.
Yeah.
You know, I would not listen to a word they say about anything.
No.
You know, where were they on Assad from Syria? Where were they with their international warrant for his arrest? They want an international warrant for the arrest of Benjamin Netanyahu. Assad's fine. You know, so was Saddam Hussein. You know, anybody who has been a brutal dictator around the world has not fallen foul of their ridiculous court, because they are...
I'm sorry, looking at the...
universally opposed to sort of, you know...
Western civilization.
Yeah, Western civilization.
Yeah, no, they are, to be honest. So that's that. I was lucky enough to speak at the Durham Union in their debate a few weeks ago, and I majored on this, actually, because I said Labour has already failed. And I hammered it, and I said it was an absolute disgrace, that it was one of the worst things in British policy for decades to give away this sovereignty just arbitrarily like that, and to pay to do so.
Which
so they're
is
now,
really
now
mad
paying.
Bit. It's really crazy.
Would you send any of these people in to negotiate for you? First, yes, you can have the islands and you can have 9 billion. Now it's suddenly got up to 18 billion.
It.
You know, and it's like the old joke. You know, 9 billion here, 9 billion there. He's talking about a serious amount of money.
Yeah, but how does it go from 9 to 18 just overnight?
But again, for the listeners,
for what?
Look at that level of incompetence by a government. If you gave an STP government that 18 billion, we could house 200,000 British citizens with houses forever. Yeah. You know, you could build the houses, and that's the cost, the opportunity cost of doing it. We're borrowing it because we're running these great big deficits. It's crazy. You've got to ask yourself, why are they doing it? Why are Lamy and Starmer doing this, look at the causes. I think the causes are their heads are full of, first, Starmer's head is full of legalese and international rights.
Yes.
But really, underneath it...
And knowing him as we do, there will be some mate of his who's involved in the International Court of Justice.
Very possible.
No question at all, because look at who's appointed. Lord Hermer, who I think is next for the chop, because the guy's got so many conflicts of interest, it's not funny. Tulip Sadiq, who was his best mate in politics, waited ages to get rid of her. She's likely to be extradited to Bangladesh on corruption charges.
Flats.
So I think he's motivated by mates of his who are lawyers.
That's one thing, but in a way I'm more concerned about a deeper thing as to whether the people that govern us have our backs and are prepared to back Britain.
Yeah.
And I think in the case of Lammy and Starmer, neither are, because both of them I'd call post-national leaders. They don't really believe in the nation state.
Lammy's an idiot. I mean,
well,
that's. I mean, there's nothing else for it.
He's a terrible.
There's a bloke who thinks that the successor to Henry VIII was Henry VII.
Yeah,
I mean,
was it Marie Antoinette, the famous
and he mistook
scientist?
Marie Antoinette for Marie Curie. And the only answers that he didn't get wrong when he was on Celebrity Mastermind were the ones he passed on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how stupid he is.
And that's great. What does a good midfielder do? Yeah. You might get that right. No, but just to go back to this, they're both anti-colonialists. They're both. I bet you, Mike, that neither of these people that are meant to be representing Britain believe that we should even have these islands.
No.
That's the problem. And if you send them into bat, they're just going to give them away, which is what they've done, exactly what they've done.
Because they don't care about history. They have no context, right? They simply have read something in The Guardian and decided to act on it. Since they left university. It's that simple.
Whose side are they on, Mike? They're not on our
side.
They're not on our side. It's evident. And Lammy is a pick. I mean, I've said before, appointing. I mean, Trump and Vance. This administration has got the wind behind it now, and they're really going for it. They're not going to mess around like last time.
No.
They will take action rapidly through executive orders. So to appoint a British foreign secretary who's accused or likened Trump to a neo-Nazi, how foolish is that?
Yeah. But I think they're even more foolish than that, because not only did they do that, but they also sent a team of people over to campaign for Kamala Harris.
Yeah, of course.
Because they thought she was going to win. That's how wrong they've got it.
And they won't.
I mean, this is a guy who backs the wrong horse in every situation. He's got no political antenna.
No.
He went to go and see Olaf Scholz in Germany a week before the government collapsed. Right? And Schultz was at Chequers last weekend. He's not even going to be in charge of Germany in about a week and a half.
Honestly, Mike, they will have thought...
a complete maniac. I mean, if you gave him the FA Cup schedule for the fourth round, he'd be picking all the wrong teams.
Yeah. Well, if he backed QPR losing the third round, he'd probably be right. Unfortunately, that's what
QPR losing is always a good bet.
Tends to happen.
Always a pretty safe bet.
They won,
just ask
last
Peter
night.
Blexley, But no, the thing is, I said this yesterday when we were talking about this new Islamophobia rule that Angela Rayner wants to bring in.
Which constituency represents?
Funny, isn't it? Yeah. Well, we played, did we not? I think yesterday the footage of her talking to a room full of Muslim men.
That's right.
Dressed very sedately. None of the flashing of the thighs for that particular mission. But she. Is talking, like many people in the Labour Party, about somehow protecting Muslims from nasty things being said about them. Well, what about the Anglophobia rule? Why don't we get somebody actually protecting British people? No, because they don't care.
No, because they're basic in their heads. Again, it's the same thing as what causes Chagos, the problems at Chagos, anti-colonialism. In their heads is basically Labour is governed by minorities good of any kind. Majority is bad. Majority
they don't like British people. They don't understand British values. They don't understand British culture.
Contempt for the working class.
And they have contempt for not just the working class, but for the upper class as well, and for everybody. They have contempt for everybody British.
Well, they put a good bet on they'll lose the next election.
No question.
They'll lose it big.
No question.
Really big.
Really big. Can I ask you about your badge? You've got a badge on. Which
I don't usually...
Very striking.
Well, it's very striking. This is for a dear friend of mine, Duncan, and this is to celebrate the 40th anniversary of a very important institution, which is the Men They Couldn't Hang, a band that we watched quite a lot. And so Duncan gave me this badge and said, wear it. I'll only do it once. But there you go.
One day only. All right. Let's talk about Rachel Reeves, because she's on the front page of the Times today, I think. Once again, deep into the mire of what she thought she was doing well, but in fact she isn't doing well at all. The Office of Budget Responsibility has basically told the Treasury that the estimates on the state of the economy are much worse than they were thought to be, and she's being told that when she has, and it's now been pretty much accepted, even though she denied it for a long time, that there will will be some kind of statement in March. It might not be a budget, but it will be some kind of financial statement. And I was told this morning by somebody who knows more than I do about this, it can't be if it's not a budget, they can't cut tax, they can't raise taxes, right? So they'll have to cut spending, and they will have to go to all of the Treasury people and say, right, here are the departments that we want to see cuts made in. And I don't think they're going to be able to do it, because the civil service has been doing this for a very long time, and they'll just go, nah, don't think so.
Well, they're still every day they're still advertising for diversity hires. So they could cut all that. That would save £1 billion. They get a control of the. And
they're not going to do what Trump does, which is just like, that's all finished.
Close
He's going to
down.
fire all those people.
Well, they should really.
They should.
I mean, to be honest, that is the SDP's policy, is to get rid of all.
I would love to see that.
You could get rid of that all of that stuff and replace it with one word.
Yeah.
Impartiality.
Yes.
Just treat people with impartiality.
Yeah.
And that's it. That does it. But yeah, I mean, Reeves is.
Well, shouldn't that be the definition of equality? You know, equality sort of sits in the middle of that DEI thing. It's equity, I know, but you know, equality is surely about everybody being treated equally, not different people being treated differently.
On merit, No, I mean, yes, a lot of these posts are really, put it frankly, Mike, are sort of anti-white racists.
Yeah.
Trying to prioritise other people, give them jobs that they are not maybe qualified for. You know, so the whole thing, it's very divisive as well. A lot of the programmes they put in, it's not only costly, it actually does bring people apart. It tears people apart. It's not unifying in any organisation.
And it's nothing to do with the business of what they're supposed to be doing.
Not at all.
It doesn't help the business. It doesn't promote any kind of, you know, financial security or financial, you know, goodness. It's just interrupt. We used to call it the business interruption department, the HR department.
Oh yeah, no. Well, it's not just. I mean, the DEI stuff isn't just the. I mean, look at England cricket. You know, it might cost, you know, $2 million. I think it's $2 million to the ECB for the posts and the stuff. But someone calculated the extra cost to every club and every county and implementing all this.
Because they have to do it
many times more. Many times. So it's much more costly than you think. Yeah. But yeah, no. Reeves is in a little bit of trouble. She left herself about $9 billion, just short of $10 billion headroom, which is the difference in outcomes. That's her headroom. That's gone. I blame her primarily for this, because the budget was a disaster. If you have doom and gloom, sentiment goes down, investment goes down, production goes down. Shouldn't be surprised that people believe you, and of course the headroom goes.
And also the uncertainty of what happened in sort of August, September, October, because they were waiting to see what the budget was going to be. I mean, that's a whole quarter. Where nobody put any business into the UK.
Yeah. So the OBR are saying there is now a fiscal hole, and it'll be very, very tough. The other thing that we should probably mention, that you no doubt have mentioned, is that we're now in a global environment, a macro environment, which is challenging, to say the least, from the point of view of tariffs and trade wars. So that, again, if Britain does get roped into that, I happen to think we won't be, actually, because I
don't think so.
Trump's partly driven by sentiment on this. I don't think he will. But if we were, then the OBR would have to issue another statement to say it's even worse, and things, you know, you'd have to cut harder or raise taxes even more. So it's a bit of a doom loop. Not good.
No, it's not good at all. We've got plenty to do between now and 10 o'clock. William, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
William Clouston there from the SDP. I hear you've got Henry Bolton on board now as well. He came on the other day and said he joined in.
He's brilliant.
So he's a good guy to get on board. Let's get a voice note from Liam on migrants.
Good morning, Mike. Liam in Folkestone here. I just thought I'd let you and your lovely listeners know that it's going to get even worse for Starmer this week. So far, under him, some 24,850 illegals have crossed the channel, which means that it's only going to take just 150 more of them to hit 25,000. 25,000 since he was elected. But don't worry, because he's smashing the gangs.
He's smashing the snaggling guns, actually, technically speaking, not the gangs. But there we are. 23 minutes past 9. We're going to talk to Nigel Jacklin after this, the man who knows a thing or two about that complete and utter waste of money down in Sussex, which was going to be a holding pen for the illegal migrants, but has now been basically abandoned by the government, having spent £7 million more than they should have done. 15 million quid down the Swanee. Brilliant. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 27 minutes past 9. Catherine in Cardiff says, Mike, I love your spot with Dan Hodges every week. You pair our modern version of Laura and Hardy, and this morning's offering was the best ever. Catherine, thank you very much indeed. It's not my fault that Dan Hodges is a comedy figure. He's meant to be a serious journalist. You know, he's meant to be a political, commentator. But I'm afraid I have to pick holes in quite a lot of what he says from time to time. One here from Ralph, who says, good morning, Mike. Kemi Badenoch has a real opportunity today to ask some searching questions to Starmer. He potentially brought Boris down with his righteous, clinical and perfect lifestyle whilst in lockdown. Sow what you reap. He can't wriggle out of this one. As usual, great show. Well, I don't think you can wriggle out of it. I'm worried, though, about Kemi Badenoch. I'm not sure she's got the cojones, if you pardon the expression, to get right to the heart of the matter. Because she seems to kind of, waver around. And she might want to ask him about Chagos. She should definitely start with something about a voice coach, even if it's just a funny reference. That's what I think she should do. We're going to talk to Nigel Jacklin from No to Northite in a moment. He was campaigning against the use of this camp, former prison camp, military prison camp, former sort of training camp, if you like, for people from an airline as well. It was supposed to be being turned into a camp for migrants. They've won a massive victory thanks to his campaigning in Bexhill, but the company that ran it was paid a bucket load of money by the government, who decided to buy it off them, and who've now wasted upwards of like 15 million quid. Absolutely ridiculous. But just before we do that, one other thing that happened yesterday was Richard Tice in the Houses of Parliament quizzed Ed Miliband. Remember him? The man who's been on the missing list for a while, ever since they've been announcing about how they want to build a third runway at Heathrow. This is their exchange on net zero yesterday.
So energy suppliers are now forecasting the April energy price cap will go up another 5%, making some 16% since last summer. So will the Secretary of State confirm to the House when will the bills come down, or will net stupid zero mean they'll only ever go up?
It's a particular pleasure to end on the honourable gentleman, Madam Deputy Speaker, because look, here it is, and this is a decision for all members of the House to make. We are currently on the roller coaster of fossil fuel markets. We have no control over them. Now, the mission of this government is to take back control. Take back control with clean, homegrown power. I urge him and members across the House, support taking back control.
Yeah, has he had a word with that guy Jürgen that we had on yesterday? Hello, Jürgen. It's Ed Miliband here. Hello. Have you got any clean energy? No. You're running GB Energy, though? Yes. Have you got any energy at all? No. When will you have some energy? I don't know. What about how much will it cost? I can't say, because it's not in my remit. Jürgen, come on, we made you the boss of GB Energy, and after a while, you're going to have to make some decisions, Can you generate any energy? No. When can we expect you to be in Parliament to answer any questions on this? No, I'm in Aberdeen. I cannot get there. OK, then. Nice to talk to you again, Jürgen. See you later. Bye-bye. That's where we are with GB Energy and these complete and utter bozos who think that net zero is the answer. Unbelievable. Let's talk to Nigel Jacklin, who's got far more sense than Jürgen and Ed Miliband put together. He was, of course, fundamental to getting rid of this ridiculous idea that this Bexhill camp should become a place of refuge for young men of fighting age. He's got some news for us, though. Nigel, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
So, it turns out, you made a famous victory down there because you managed to get to see off the Home Office, which was not easy to do. But unfortunately, we are now left with a massive bill because the Home Office decided to buy this place, didn't they, off the people who had previously owned it. They used to rent it from them, but then they made this crazy decision, I don't know who made it, to spend about 15 million quid on it when it only was really worth about 7.
Yeah. So private investors bought it for 6 million.
Right.
Then the Home Office paid 15, and they paid a penalty for agreeing the contract late. They decided not to use it in December, and the Public Accounts Committee meeting, which we attended in December, released its report this morning.
Right.
It's not very good reading at all.
It's not. It says that basically the Home Office's plans to house asylum seekers reveal, in their words, a dysfunctional culture of repeated mistakes and weak internal challenges. And it's not just the 15 million they spent on North Eye, but they spent about 100 million on various other sites, which are now proving to be completely useless as well.
Yeah, and they said that they had identified over 1,000 lessons that needed to be learned.
Yeah.
Now, I think they need a lesson in lesson learning, because there's no way you can learn 1,000 lessons. And actually, they were criticised for repeating the lessons that they were already supposed to have learned.
Right.
One of which is communicating with communities. And to this date, the government information page on North Eye still says they haven't taken a decision. It's got the July information.
Right.
In December, they said that they weren't going to use it, so they're just useless.
Yeah, they really are. Considering how many people are employed to do this stuff, you'd think at least one of them would be given permission or responsibility for putting stuff that's on the website actually currently on the website. And also, I mean, what are they doing about selling it? Are they selling it back to the people they bought it from, or how's that all going?
It's on the government list. It has, I think, to remain on the government list for 8 weeks, so that should be up in the next week or so.
Right.
So if no other government department wants it, it goes back on the open market. Brockwell, the company that bought it, purports to be a property investment company, but it doesn't really fit within their portfolio. And we've traced their interest in the site back to April 2021.
Right.
That doesn't appear in the government report, but that's the point at which the Home Office appointed a team to work on this. And then Clearview got involved. So some people think there's a link between them, and there's two private investors, Peter Klimp and Charles Isaacs, who are involved with Brockwell. So we don't know where the money's gone.
Right.
It doesn't seem to be in Brockwell's accounts either.
Oh, really? Yeah. I mean, this is the trouble. There doesn't appear to be much kind of scrutiny given to any of these deals, because if you imagine £100 million swilling around from somebody in the Home Office just signing cheques and going, yeah, there you go, there's 15 million over there, there's 10 million over there. You know, who's watching this stuff?
Well, the chair and the new intake Labour MPs were clearly shocked by the Home Office's performance. The chair was a surveyor. I mean, if you're going to buy something, why don't you just look up what the site was sold for last time? We found that it was sold for 6 million.
I mean, call me old-fashioned. It's a bit like when you're looking to buy a house. You know, you look up on the land register what the last house in that street sold for that might be similar to the one you're looking to buy. You know, it's not difficult, is it?
Yeah, and the fact that there's asbestos on there was known. If they'd spoken to people locally, or if they'd even bothered to read the papers, they would have known that. And it's the other bit that hasn't come out is that, I don't know if you remember Clonelly, where there was the hotel with difficult access. North Eye's the same. And when we doorstepped our MP, he acknowledged the fact that access was difficult. And so if you do have local people who oppose something, a site with difficult access could be a problem.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much bread and butter stuff, this, isn't it? I mean, you've worked in different jobs over time, Nigel, and maybe in government work and in local government work as well. I mean, are they particularly dense, the people that work in the civil service? Or do they just not have any oversight, that nobody actually asks them what they're doing?
Yeah, I did some work a long time ago for the local council, and the bloke who paid for it then asked if I could write the report for him, and he submitted it as his MA submission.
As his own work?
Yes.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, I just don't understand how we managed to find all of these thick, stupid, useless people and put them all in the same place, i.e. the Home Office, or, you know, the Foreign Office.
Members of the audience who are any good at jobs could apply and work for them. I mean, one of the ladies I spoke to in the campaign said her son was working for Border Force, and it was really quite depressing. He was sticking with it because he believed that Border Force needed to protect our borders. But the lawyers that were down there welcoming the arrivals, you know, it was just really depressing.
Yeah.
And there's nothing in the report that suggests that the flow of arrivals is going to abate.
No. Well, we just heard from our last voice note that we're going to hit 25,000 people, come into the country since Keir Starmer was Prime Minister.
And Labour's answer seems to be to allow them to stay. And actually, the overwhelming majority of people here, they didn't want it, they didn't want the camp, but they don't want these people here. And, you know, for whatever reason, it's our country. There are more deserving people back where these determined people have come from.
Yeah.
We kind of need to get our priorities right.
Yeah, totally. I couldn't agree more. Nigel, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for the update. Nigel Jacklin there from No to North Eye. North Eye being the place in Sussex where they wanted to use as a place to put something up to, I think he said 1,800 migrants, but that's not happening. But they still own it. They paid 15 million for it, which was approximately, I think, 9 million over the odds. I mean, what's wrong with these people? Does anybody know how to run anything? Coming up, we're going to speak to Mark McDonald. He's a barrister for Lucy Letby. We'll get from him what happens now after that revelatory story from yesterday and the press conference, which revealed basically that there's no evidence, according to campaigners now and experts, to link Lucy Letby to any deaths whatsoever of any of the babies that she was convicted of killing. Extraordinary stuff. It's all happening here. This is Morning Glory.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:40. I'm Mike Gray with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Brewer here. Just before that happens, she'll be here just about 2 minutes to 10. Kevin in Stafford says this, Mike, Talk's questions as to who was doing what to who, or with whom, on the 24th of December on 2020, need to be asked to Number 10 and Labour Party HQ, so that no one can avoid answering by saying, it's not our remit, Gov. The supplementary question of who else was there then needs followed up. More questions to those named as to what they did, saw or heard. I think, right, it's very straightforward. We'll put those questions to Number 10 today, and we'll come back to you tomorrow with what it is that they say. Let's have a look now, though, at another story which is dominating the front pages this morning, and it is, of course, the story about Lucy Letby. The Daily Telegraph headline says, basically, Letby did not kill a single baby. There are growing calls for a retrial as a panel yesterday in a press conference provided medical explanations for every death, including Dr. Shu Lee, who's the president of the Canadian Neonatal Foundation. Here's what he had to say.
In summary, ladies and gentlemen, we did not find any murders. In all cases, death or injury were due to natural causes or just bad medical care. Lucy was charged with 7 murders and 7 attempted murders. In our opinion, the medical evidence doesn't support murder in any of these babies, just natural causes and bad medical care. Our full report will go to Lucy's barrister later this month, and then it'll be up to him in the courts to decide what next to do.
I mean, this was an incredible intervention by Dr. Shu Lee, whose own evidence was provided without his knowledge, by the way, by the prosecution, who used his kind of, information, if you like, his published papers to infer how Lucy Letby could have killed all of these babies. Let's talk to Mark MacDonald now, as a barrister on Lucy Letby's team. Mark, very good morning to you.
Morning.
Good to talk to you. I mean, quite an extraordinary day yesterday, really. I mean, David Davis MP was involved as well, a few other people too. I guess a lot of people have already heard what you had to say and what was published yesterday. What's been the reaction that you can tell us about? And if anything, how has it kind of encouraged you to hope, against hope perhaps, that there will be now finally a chance to have a retrial?
You know, I was instructed back in September, and my remit really was to look at this with a fresh pair of eyes. And, starting right from the beginning, I realised that there was something had gone wrong during the trial. But I've been doing this type of work for about 25 years. So, miscarriages of justice, looking at this sort of thing. And often you get emails into chambers, or you might get letters. Often some of them can be quite negative. I can tell you now that every day I get 10, 20, 30 emails coming into chambers to my clerks, and then they land up on my desk. Not one of them, not one, has been negative. That people are sort of saying, look, we've looked at this, could this help? Or I've had senior doctors contact me, or I've had retired chief executives from trusts, I've had professors and academics coming in saying, look, we too felt that something had gone wrong in this trial. But the problem was, as you know, and it's not the fault of journalists or the media, but you're fed during the trial one position constantly, the sort of drip feeding from the prosecution or from the police. And so there was a whole narrative out there, and really not any thorough analysing until a New Yorker article. You may remember the New Yorker article, and it was banned in the UK, in fact. And so,
which is kind of extraordinary in itself, really, isn't it? The fact that you couldn't read it if you were living in Britain.
No, so you got one narrative which was a very negative narrative, but this thorough analysis that had gone on wasn't allowed to be published. But and David Davis actually raised it in the House of Commons. Why can't we see this? Anyway, from that, other things started. The ball started rolling, and we started seeing and exposing really what had gone wrong in this trial. And yesterday, yes, you had all this panel come together, this international panel from 7 different countries, saying, look, we've analysed everything, and we cannot see any malfeasance whatsoever at the hands of anybody, not just Lucy Letby, but we see poor medical care. Now, what goes next? What happens next? Well, it's down to me to it's now down to me to put everything into the Criminal Cases Review Commission, to write submissions, to analyse the evidence that we're given, and try and persuade them to send it back to the Court of Appeal.
Yeah.
Because the body we need to be in front of with all this evidence are the judges, to say, look at all this.
The same
evidence.
Judges?
No.
Different judges?
Yeah, they will constitute a new panel of judges. Look at it. And for them to decide on this really quite strong evidence whether or not this conviction should be overturned.
Yeah. I mean, is there grounds, do you think, Mark, for people to say, well, what about the defence team the first time around? How were they so incapable of garnering any of this information? How were they so useless? Why did they not, for example, talk to Dr. Shu Lee, I don't know if they did, and ask his opinion, given that his kind of recommendations and his papers were being used by the prosecution? Is there not a case to argue that the defence in this case, for Lucy Letby the first time around, were incompetent?
one thing I've done is not go into the realm of criticising the defence team at trial. There was an experienced King's Counsel and two
But they
junior...
must have been at fault, surely.
Well, what I haven't done is got into that, because I don't think it's right for me to do so right now, because first of all, I wasn't there and I wasn't able to see
I understand that, and I think that's an honourable position, but even if I was to push you on it and press you on it, would you not concede that you know, they could have done a slightly better job, shall we say?
Well, and the second reason, and let me just finish this point and then I'll come back straight to your question. The second is because it's not going to work in the Court of Appeal. It's not going to overturn her conviction. Me whinging on about the fact that the defence team didn't do that, didn't do that, may be of interest to those outside, but it's certainly not going to be interested to the Court of Appeal judges. And my job is, if those experts are right, and this is actually a miscarriage of justice, is to overturn this conviction. Yeah. So me, in essence, going down that rabbit hole of why did they do this and why didn't they do that is all of, you know, maybe of interest to some, but not to the Court of Appeal.
But won't that be a question that they will ask you?
No,
what they will consider that, you know, here's a trial that's already happened. Here's a case where the winning question, Lucy Letby, had a perfectly good defence counsel and a perfectly good opportunity to prove that she was innocent, and somehow they failed to do that.
Yeah, they will ask that question. You're absolutely right. Well, they won't ask that question. What they will say is, well, there was this opportunity to bring it up in the first trial. They didn't take it. We're not going to go into the reasons why they didn't take it, but we just know they didn't take it. So why are you now saying that you want to argue it, that you want to bring it up? And me saying, well, maybe they should have done, maybe they shouldn't have done, and that's not Lucy's fault, is not going to sway at all with the judges. What I have to say, and the reason why I've done what I've done, is say, look, the expertise that were called by the prosecution before the trial, we say were not as credible, nowhere near as credible as the experts that have come forward from across the world and analysed. And so now we have this juggernaut of expert evidence from across the world that demolishes the evidence that was put before. Let's be absolutely frank. And so it's the rate of the evidence, Court of Appeal, that is so strong now. It matters not that this didn't happen at the trial. We've got to deal with the situation we're in now. And this evidence says, look, you know, she did nothing wrong.
And as far as I understand it, as the law is, and you'll, I'm sure, correct me if I'm wrong, there needs to be effectively new evidence that you can bring forward to get an appeal or to overturn the verdict. I mean, I don't know if you're seeking to sort of nullify the first trial and have a second trial, or whether you're just appealing the conviction on the first trial.
Yeah, so you're right. It has to be fresh evidence, and one of the questions, again, you're right from your earlier questions, is going to be, well, the defence team could have done this and didn't do it. So you have to deal with that argument. You don't win by saying, well, they weren't very good or whatever, they made a bad decision. You win by saying, yes, that may be right, but look what we've got, and it's huge. Yeah. And that's the way you win it. And when it comes to overturning the conviction, my job, is to overturn the conviction based upon the evidence that I can present to them. The prosecution will say, well, we want a retrial. Yeah. And it's up to the Court of Appeal to decide whether there should be a retrial.
Okay. And do you think, I mean, obviously you do, but specifically on the law, do you think, having had it turned down twice, that there's enough now new evidence for them to at least consider it?
Forget the second appeal. That was on a very discrete point on one small case that was a retrial. Okay. It's the main Court of Appeal, that first Court of Appeal decision. And that was predominantly all about the reliability of the prosecution's main expert. Right. I think there's now substantial material that goes to his reliability, both as an expert, but also in relation to what he has said since in numerous interviews that he's given to the TV and podcasts and programmes since Lucy Letby has been convicted.
Right. It's a fascinating situation, isn't it? I mean, like, I don't know if like you, I mean, I started talking to Peter Hitchens about this many months ago, and I was very much, as I've often been in conversation with Peter Hitchens, not sure he was in any way correct. And I said, well, surely, you know, there's been a court case, there's been a jury trial, there's been, you know, decisions, there's been evidence, there's been arguments made, you know, why would you question it? But of course, you know, like a lot of times, you know, he's kind of convinced me now that at the very least, and he's been very straight about it, he hasn't said that she's innocent. He just says, I think there's grounds for a re-examination of the evidence and a retrial of what we now know. He's not saying that, you know, she should be released or anything like that. And I think that's kind of where I am now. And I think a lot of people are the same, that they at first were thinking, well, surely the process is good and true, and why should we question it? But I think a lot of people are now questioning it.
Right, can I just say that the first time I spoke on this issue, on Lucy Letby, was the day that she was convicted. One of your researchers, not one of your researchers, but for Talk, contacted me, because I think I was on a list somewhere and I was a criminal barrister, right. Can you come talk about the case? And the screen came up and I said within the first couple of minutes, I think there may be a miscarriage of justice there.
Right.
And it was this interview. It was the first time that we started. It all started here, actually.
Right.
Two presenters gave me a pretty hard time for about 15 minutes because I'd taken this sort of stance that you know, there wasn't this counter narrative. It started on your radio station.
Well, I mean, you know, we are the home of common sense after all, so, you know, no doubt, you know, those people have probably been kicked out since then because they didn't have the right instincts, but there we are. But Mark, listen, it's a fascinating case, and obviously it's a tragic case in so many ways as well, because Lucy Letby's life has been undoubtedly ruined by everything that's happened, and you can't imagine what she's going through. Aside from that, also for the parents and the families of the children, some of whom the Daily Mail has decided to focus on and say, you know, this is terrible for the memories of the children. I mean, I take that point, but I think there's more at stake here really than that, isn't there?
Yeah, I think what they want to know, and I'm sure what they want to see, is the truth.
Yeah.
You know, that's what they're going to want, is answers. Well, look, you know, we were told, first of all, that these were natural deaths. Years later, you came and told us that they were murdered. Someone's been convicted, and now we've got this overwhelming body of experts to say, in fact, no, this is bad medical care. They're going to be angry. They're going to be angry at me. Yeah. They're going to be angry at the police. They're going to be angry at the prosecution, and rightly so. What we really need is the further inquiry is a pause right now. We need people to step in and say, we're going to look at everything that's happened in this case, including the medical care, to see whether or not and where the truth really lies.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, we'll be talking to you, I'm sure, again over the course of the next few weeks and months, but thank you very much indeed for taking the time to talk to us. Mark MacDonald there, barrister for Lucy Letby, hopeful, indeed even more perhaps than hopeful, that they will now have enough to get a retrial and an appeal on the basics of the facts, which are that, you know, according to this panel of experts, she could not possibly have murdered these babies because there's no evidence really to provide that story with any kind of backing. It's a very strange story, and it's a very strange case. But listen, Peter Hitchens, once again, who led the way here on Talk, and as you heard there from Mark MacDonald, Talk led the way on the story all the way through. It's 9:55.
Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper are a bit like Icarus flying towards the sun on immigration. What they're doing is actually encouraging illegally people to make their way here. That's what it is. The new legislation is going to make it much more difficult to make the case for removing people. It's already very difficult, but it's going to make it even more difficult.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:58. Goodness me, that's really loud in my ear. I've suddenly realised that I didn't have it in my ear the whole time. Now it's in my ear. It's really loud. Julie Hartley-Brewer's here. Very good morning.
Are you having a senile moment?
I am, I think, yeah. Here's the tweet of the day.